approach. The result is there's limited buy-in from the staff trying to implement the program. Secondly, the illustrative math program involves a significant change in sequencing of curriculum and the method of teaching and learning used in the classroom. In a sense, it's the NGSS for math. We are attempting to implement IM for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 all at once, but our students aren't used to thinking and learning in the way that IM requires, and teachers aren't used to teaching in the prescribed format. IM assumes that students have prior knowledge, but because our students have never been exposed to IM in the past, we've had to create a lot of supplemental material to fill in the gaps. Complicating matters, in talking to a Desmos rep, that's a company, IM was designed for a 190-day instructional cycle and 40 to 45-minute periods. When taking field trips, review days, midterms and finals, PSAT days, et cetera, into consideration, we have between 150 and 160 instructional days. So between the fewer instructional days, the longer class periods, and the need to teach supplemental material, teachers are having to do an incredible amount of prep work to put together lesson plans that will work for students. We are also going to have to drop a bunch of curriculum because we don't have the time to get to everything. It would have been better to have purchased IM for the whole district starting from 6th grade on, implement one grade level at a time so teachers and students can get used to the IM approach, and within 6 years you would have gotten the program properly implemented. As it is, it will take years to move off of the hybrid approach we've had to implement this year and to get to the full IM experience. And even then, you may not get there because we are using EdGEMS for the 6th through 8th grade levels. In any case, until we have IM fully implemented, we won't be able to determine if all the effort we are putting into this conversion was worth it. Lastly, implementing IM the way we are is burning out your math department. All teachers teaching IM courses are spending all of their school time and much of their personal time trying to stay ahead of the students. This isn't healthy for teachers, nor is it good for students. There's also a huge opportunity cost because the math department doesn't have any time to participate in other district initiatives like the district improvement plan or the grading change policy. IM has become the one and sole priority for the department. I also have some comments regarding the workbooks, but I suspect my time is running short. So let me just say that teachers don't want them, and they would find them more counterproductive than helpful. So in conclusion, we do have high hopes for the long-term benefits of IM program. In the short term, the way we have chosen to implement the program we believe to be confusing for the students because they haven't been taught to learn this way, and challenging for the teachers because of the enormous amount of work needed to adapt IM to the realities of our current classrooms.
Thank you. Anybody else at this time? Just a reminder that we do take comment before action items and at the end of the meeting. Seeing none, we will move on. Right now I'm going to ask for the board's unanimous support. If we can just move up 6C, first reading of policies. First reading of policy 6146, students' requirements for graduation. Seeing no objection, Mrs. Mexicanelli, I'll give you a second to.
I apologize. I thought we were getting a packet here at the table, so you will get that by tomorrow. But this has some urgency to it, so this is a first reading based on an audiobook, and the audiobook is my speaking. So I don't mean to be cavalier about it. Maybe even we could. I know Ms. Hardman is gone. So what has come before the policy committee for our 5 o'clock meeting, and I requested that Chair Vitale put it on for a first read tonight because this involves graduation requirements for the current senior class. We wanted to move very quickly on this for the obvious reason that it directly impacts what staff will do for these students. As you may or may not recall, when we approved the new graduation requirements in accordance with the changes that we needed to due to state statute, moving up to 25 credits, which included a 1.0 mastery credit. How Fairfield chose to address the 1.0 mastery credit was via 2 half credits. 1 half credit comes about through fulfilling proficient scores on a combination of assessments. It could be the evidence-based reading and writing. It could be the SAT math. It could be an AP arts course. There are a variety of means of standard tests that a student could hit that benchmark and receive that 0.5 credit. That's not what is at issue with the change that we're asking the board to consider for a vote at our next meeting. It's the other 0.5 mastery credit, which, if you recall, involves the academic expectations created by our staff that we wanted as an assured component of a Fairfield Public Schools diploma, that our students, we have mastered certain skills. If you recall, now those of you with elementary school kids or middle school have not seen this on the report card. For anybody else listening, if you remember seeing those standards, it used to be met by a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now it is simply a 0, 1, or 2, simplifying it. Long story short, the idea was that they had to achieve mastery in 6 of those academic expectations. Those academic expectations would be measured by common assessments across all departments. So music, cooking, English, science, all of them bore some responsibility for measuring that our students were collaborative, were doing synthesis and analysis, communicating, problem solving, etc. Due to our 2 years involved with COVID and the hybrid time, the formation of those formative assessment, of those common assessments for measuring this, and sometimes even for the opportunity to do the assessment at all, was tremendously impacted, such that we have a senior class right now that and I put the number away. I don't know if Ms. Jackson and Mrs. Guernsey has it at hand, or if Dr. Hatzis has it ready at the hand. We have a tremendous number of the class of 2023 that is well short of being able to hit all 6 of those academic expectations with mastery. And so what has come to us as a request are 2 key language changes. One, that this class of 2023 would be compelled to receive their diploma to hit 3 out of the 6 academic expectations. The second change involved the month during which that the process would be worked out for the counselor, the academic team, the house team, to work with those students who have not yet met the academic expectations. In the policy right now, it currently says August. We're looking, the staff is recommending, and we agreed with the idea of moving that to September. But I don't think that part is where there's much discussion. All of our discussion was focused on the 3 out of the 6, as opposed to 6 out of 6. So there's a second part to this, but I want to pause there because that is the language change, which you will have in your email by tomorrow. So I want to pause there for questions. And again, Dr. Hatzis is here for any questions that I can't answer.
Thank you, Mrs. Maxinelli, and apologize that we don't have this language there, being that the policy committee was, right before this meeting. We weren't exactly sure if there were going to be changes, but thank you for the recap. Dr. Hatzis is here. I invite him if there's anything else that you think the board should know, or if the board has any questions for Mrs. Maxinelli and the policy committee or Dr. Hatzis, we'll take them now. Ms. Kelly.
Hi. I'm not sure who this question would be for, because I just have a new high schooler, so new concept to me in total. But of the 3 of the 6, is there 1 or 2 that stand out that are really the ones where people are missing the mark on, or is it?
Thank you. Greg Hatzis, head principal, Fairfield Ludlow High School. Thank you to all the board for allowing us the opportunity to present this to you and through the policy committee. So the answer is actually yes. There are a couple of the academic expectations that fewer students met, but it's not because they're missing the mark. It's because they haven't had the opportunity. Due to the fact that we weren't able to move forward with this work during the shutdown and the hybrid instruction year, the staff didn't have the opportunity to actually create the assessments during this particular senior classes, the end of freshman, all of sophomore years. So they've only had 1 year, their junior year, in which they would have had the opportunity. So it's more about the lack of opportunity than it is their ability to meet the expectations.
Ms. Dresa?
Yes. Could you just touch on how this language change would fall and keep us within legislation?
Sure. So when the change came out that we what the state requirement was a 1.0 mastery credit. How the district chose to measure that was left up to the district. We could have had it simply be just the academic expectations or just something else of our, so it's really our freedom. What isn't negotiable is we have to have a 1.0 mastery credit. So if we make this change and that satisfies us for mastery, then we are fine.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
Is it just for the class of 2023?
That's the next part I'm going to talk about. But to be very clear, the language change that we voted on in policy, which will come to you tomorrow, is solely for the class of 2023.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Hatzis? Okay, Mrs. Maxinelli, we'll just stay there just in case. She's going to keep on talking.
Okay, so what came up in policy was a far broader conversation. Again, we are comfortable with this because we want to be able to empower our staff to have very clear direction on if we reduce it to these three, they know which students have not yet met that mastery goal. In addition, of course, we have the other mastery goal that they are looking to achieve, which is hitting proficiency on their standardized tests. But staff needs to know which students do they need to work with now to come up with a plan for achieving these goals to achieve mastery. And so that is what we're looking to do immediately. However, the broader conversation came about because however very well-intentioned and well-debated this had been in policy committee when we split the 1.0 credit into 0.5, 0.5. One thing, and I'm just letting the board know that we felt it was very important that staff could get to work right now with this senior class. But there is a very good chance we're going to be bringing this back to you again sooner rather than later as a reflection of our broader conversation of perhaps changing how we address that 1.0 mastery credit. Perhaps these academic expectations could be better folded into the curriculum and we could focus the sole 1.0 on those standardized tests. That we didn't make a decision and policy committee was not comfortable making that significant a decision tonight. And so we have asked staff to have that conversation because there was a tremendous amount of work that went into those academic expectations when they came before us. Those have been in the works for years. And so I just wanted to let the board know, and this is to the question of does this affect any other classes? That's what we're going to see. So for right now, we wanted the immediate direction for the class of 2023, and we will continue the conversation in policy. Did I capture that well enough? Okay, but happy to take any questions if there are.
Any further questions on this? Ms. Kelly, no? No reason to apologize.
I'm just wondering, it might not be policy necessarily, but when you say identifying the students, I just don't know if this is something that we would have thought we would have caught in when we were identifying kids, when we were using grant money to talk about learning loss and all this. Like, this seems exactly like what we were talking about, kind of learning loss, mastery, like that's completely different. Like, I just don't know how, like, could we have used some of that grant money and the identification process then to have helped then?
I'll jump on part of our conversation. What's really important to understand is it's one thing if it's the child's demonstration. It's another thing if we haven't even given them the opportunity. So the identifying is not about students who are falling short due to needing more academic support. Many of them literally haven't had the chance to take the assessment whereby they would receive that 1 or 2. So again, it's not for me to decide our grant money. That's a far bigger conversation. But I don't think this isn't a learning loss issue. This is an opportunity to take an assessment for mastery opportunity. And those were ones where we're, for the sake of consistency, for the sake of feeling good as a district, that this is a robust assessment that we stand behind, that accurately assesses and gives feedback to students who need growth. Well, they haven't even gotten the feedback that they need growth because they literally haven't taken it.
Okay, so just because when I write down that, 3 out of the, like, they're on target to not we want to change it to 3 out of the 6. I'm assuming that's because they haven't mastered, but it's not necessarily that they haven't mastered it. Like, I think that's where I was, and I know you said that kind of in the beginning. I just needed to hear it 3 times. So, sorry.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you all. And again, I'm going to send an email right now to be sure you get that in your inbox tomorrow.
Thank you to the board and the policy committee for expediting this so that our staff and students can get an answer hopefully before the end of this month. Thank you.
And while we moved up 6C, why don't we just handle the other policy while we have you, Mrs. Maxincanelli. Policy 6999, students, district-provided distance learning.
Sure. Once again, this one's even easier. If you recall, policy 6999 has 2 parts. One, which is just general, quite frankly, very vague verbiage regarding the opportunity and the expectation of remote learning as being robust, rigorous, et cetera. That part policy kept, and the part that was struck was the very specific COVID policy. And most importantly about the COVID paragraph is that it came with those administrative regs. And if you recall, those are the ones that outlined what teachers needed to do in terms of opening up Google Meets, in terms of having contact with students, et cetera. And so in policy, we did vote to strike that COVID paragraph. And by doing so, that also completely strikes those administrative regs. And so and then we changed to Roman numeral. So those were our changes in policy. And if there are any questions, happy to take that.
Any questions about this?
And Dr. Tracy may want to add some.
Dr. Tracy?
color.
Just a comment. This does not take anything away from the fact that when youngsters are out for an extended period of time, be it for COVID, the flu, mono, a broken leg, that we provide them with assistance to keep up with their studies and give them the chance to catch up when they get back. What it means is that we would not have a separate class of stuff to do specifically related to a COVID diagnosis. And this is consistent with the advice that we've been getting over the last few months from state and local health authorities. So I hope you'll look favorably on it when it comes back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Thank you, the policy committee. And if board members have any questions after getting the first draft of this policy, please just email them to Mrs. Maxincanelli directly and copy Dr. Tracy and myself. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to presentations. Presentation AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, Physics curriculum changes.
And
Dr.
I think
Tracy?
Dr. Zavajancic and his crew are here to present these items.
Good evening, everybody. James Zavajancic, Chief Academic Officer, and I am here with Ms. Lasala, who will introduce some of her teachers momentarily for the curriculum update presentation. The first agenda item is for AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, and our regular physics class at this point. The science curriculum doesn't come up for review for some years at this point. We want to be transparent in changes that are occurring both at the College Board level and at the district level, knowing that these are district improvement plan goals through the NGSS assessment, and we want to be aligned with them. So for presentation only tonight, we bring you these 3 courses, which the content is not changing, but the sequencing and some other areas of the courses are changing, and give you that information and be able to answer questions with the experts at the table today. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Lasala to introduce her staff and go through the first presentation.
Hi, good evening. I would like to introduce 2 teachers that are with me tonight from Fairfield Public Schools. We have Mr. Matt Apgar and Ms. Lisa Costin, 2 of our wonderful science teachers here in the Fairfield Public Schools. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you our proposals for some updates to our current existing curriculum, as well as following this, propose a new course. So moving on the slides. What I want to talk to you first about is 3 courses that currently exist in Fairfield Public Schools and some changes that we want to make to the curriculum. You've been given copies of the actual curriculum documents so that you can see the changes, but I wanted to point out the highlights of those changes to you and explain why we are proposing them. For physics, beginning in 23-24, what we would like to do is include additional standards to meet student learning expectations outlined in the NGSS and better prepare students for the 11th grade NGSS assessment. You can see up in the slides specific standards that we're looking to add around physical science and earth science. The second thing we are proposing in this redesign of physics is the reorganization of the units to reflect a phenomena-based approach to our units versus a topic-based approach. Phenomena-based learning is the model that it is best supported for teaching students in line with the next generation science standards, and also provides a real-world context for learning. Those of you who were present last year when I presented the environmental chemistry course, this is very much in the same vein of creating units that are interdisciplinary, real-world context, relevant to student learning, and they learn the science concepts through those topics. Finally, we're also bringing in some standards that will provide students with learning in geophysics and astrophysics. And these are standards that are tested on the grade 11 assessment. And we want to make sure that students have given the opportunity to learn those standards that are tested on the assessment. Finally, we also want to include 2 levels to the physics course, an honors and a college prep. And the reason we want to be able to do that is to better be able to meet the needs of our students, especially for those students who are ready for enrichment and ready to explore additional topics beyond the basics of what's required in NGSS. Okay. I'm wondering, I could present this now or I could take questions. Okay. Okay. So updates. Okay, so then as far as the updates for AP Physics 1 and AP Physics 2, we want to make some unit changes for AP Physics 1 and 2 based on changes that are being made by the College Board. The College Board puts forth a framework for their courses through which the test blueprint is created and the AP exam is based upon. So as you can see in summary, some of the units have been moved from AP Physics 1 to AP Physics 2, specifically waves and electricity. Fluid mechanics is being moved from AP Physics 2 to AP Physics 1. And in addition, we reorganized the units, some of our existing AP Physics 1 units, to kind of break them into smaller chunks of learning for students. And what we would like to do, which we're not proposing today, we would like to request the adoption of a new AP Physics textbook, a textbook that would work for both AP Physics 1 and 2. We would bring that forth in a subsequent presentation where we would go through all the aspects of the adoption, the search for the text and the adoption process, but wanted to just share that information now and let you know that that's coming. This slide shows us an example of our current program of studies. If you're curious where physics and AP Physics 1 fit within our current program of studies, they're generally 11th and 12th grade courses, though we do allow some 10th graders to take AP Physics 1 if they want to double up on sciences and follow an accelerated path. As far as the resources needed to make these changes, the only thing we're looking for is this textbook adoption, which I mentioned, which we will bring to you later in a separate presentation. We don't believe that these changes will have any impact on personnel or staffing. And though we do want to be able to spend some time over the summer in 2023 to flesh out our units and develop our unit implementation guides for the physics courses, those units that are going to be phenomena-driven. And at this point, if you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to take them.
I just have a question. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the timing for the College Board. When are they implementing these changes, or have they already to the Physics 1 and 2?
It's for next year, so it would be for the test for next year. It's not impacting this year.
Okay. Thank you for that. And then secondly, I was just wondering, trying to understand better the need for the honors level of physics. Is that something that you know we have a need for, or just how that came about as adding essentially an extra level? Is that what we're doing? We're adding an extra level of physics?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons why we want to add an honors versus a CP level and have those two levels. But I think maybe I will ask our two teachers who teach the course to elaborate.
So I currently teach regular physics. It's an elective level course, which means it's neither college prep nor honors. And I have such a spectrum of students that I have usually students who say, oh, you know, if there was something that wasn't AP 1, I would have taken honors physics because I really want to go to that next level. And then I have students who are like, I'm still a little afraid of physics. I'm here because my guidance counselor put me here. But, you know, I want to just stick with what's basic. And I want to respect both of those perspectives in my room. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have that honors college prep. And also, I also teach chemistry. And I have a lot of students who are afraid to go into physics because they hear physics as it currently is more of an honors level course from their friends, from their peers. Guidance counselors are usually a little hesitant sometimes. And then if there's a college prep level, we're going to open that up to more students who just feel better about the level of challenge offered there. So by adding that separation, students are going to feel more comfortable where they are, having those expansion questions. And especially since we're adding these layers of curriculum where we're putting this in context, the reading that we're going to be doing, the math calculations we're going to be doing, can really be catered better to what the class wants to do. You as a teacher can do so much more when you have a class that is more on the same page.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to add one other thing to what Ms. Costin said, is that another goal here of adding the two levels is not all of our juniors are taking physics. They're taking other things. And our NGSS assessment from the state in grade 11 tests content that's in the physics course. So when students don't take physics, they don't learn the content, and then they're not prepared for the state test. So by providing that CP option, we can make sure that we are opening this course up to all learners, and that they can be provided the supports and be able to be successful on the NGSS assessment.
Mrs. Gerber had her hand up. So Ms. Gerber and then Mrs. Maxick. Do you have a follow-up or new question?
Thank you. So one question in looking at the cost, so there won't be any need for any like professional development or anything, just with some of the changes going on with the courses for the teachers with the new material or changed material?
So that's a great question. So we have been on this journey of transitioning to next generation science standards for a while. So the building of our phenomena-based courses is something that we've been working on as a department for a number of years now. And part of that work is we've done a lot of thinking as a physics team about this course. And I think that we're ready to go. We're ready to go for it. So again, I will defer to my teachers here and see if they have any thoughts about that.
We're ready.
Great, that's awesome. And then just another question. So regarding the textbook, so is this like a sneak preview of the upcoming budget? Will we be seeing this request?
Yes, I was going
So
to put
the
that in the
hope,
budget.
the,
Yes.
hopefully, your hope is that this book will come to us at some point and be part of the 23-24 budget.
That's correct.
Mrs. Maxinelli.
Thank you. And just actually sort of a follow-up to Mrs. Guernsey's point, I am so incredibly enthusiastic about the idea of adding an extra level. This was a change, and actually I'm sure Mrs. Gerber would remember, probably 2010-ish, 2011, that they dropped the honors physics level. And so students had no choice but to take either physics or AP. And so many students, first of all, were in AP physics who were undoubtedly uncomfortable, which absolutely impacted teaching. So I am so excited that this is finally being done. I know it will create a bit of a scheduling issue as you try to, because it could end up being a singleton or whatever, but I do absolutely think this is in the best interest of kids. I mean, there's even a fourth level of practical physics, but I'm happy that we're at least adding this, so very appreciative of that. I do have one question for the physics curriculum. With the addition of these units, does that also have something that's being taken out?
No, we're not taking any standards out of the existing physics course. We're adding some additional standards, specifically earth science standards that we know are tested on the NGSS assessment, that we want to make sure that students have an opportunity to learn. And again, the way that we're building these units, it's not about topics, it's phenomena. So we look at an earth science phenomena, excuse me, and we use that phenomena to explore the physics concepts. And I think by combining those two, you kind of, you get two birds with one stone. You can work on two different standards around the same phenomena. And so that's why that unit-based bundling works really well.
And I'll add that we actually, to some degree, already do teach some of these earth science standards in there. I'll point out an example of Earth's place in the universe. In physics, we're already covering Newton's law of gravitation, and that governs the solar system, and we wind up talking about Earth's place in the solar system. So we're already talking about a lot of these, not just that one, in the physics course. So it doesn't really feel to us like we're adding anything.
And therefore, you don't feel like there's something that's going to end up getting short shrift of a different topic?
No.
Okay.
No, I would add to what happened when in 2018, this is prior to me being here, when the science department did their curriculum review for NGSS. In the process, they put the standards in their existing course framework rather than building courses for the new framework. And when they did that, there's not that many physics standards, so you ended up with a biology course with 25 standards and a physics course with 10, right? So the existing physics course had a very small number of standards in it anyway, so that's another consideration too.
Okay, I do appreciate the example of the solar system that, again, just it helps it to make sense, so thank you. Just one other question. I know that when we approved the AP Physics C, correct, that a very common jump is to go from 1 to C, if I'm correct. So how do this movement of units impact the preparation of students for the Physics C?
Since I teach AP Physics C, I'll take this one. It wouldn't really impact them at all because the students who take AP Physics 1, oh wait, are you talking about the movement of the AP Physics 1?
So talking about the
standards?
waves and electricity topics being taken out of Physics 1 and fluid mechanics being put into Physics 1, most especially the first one with the removal, how does that impact the C students?
Gotcha. So it wouldn't really impact them at all because College Board, if you recall during the pandemic, College Board chopped a few units off of their AP tests for the pandemic, and then it restored for all of them except for AP Physics 1. Those 3 last units, electricity and waves, remained removed from the AP test. Now, while we do still cover those in AP Physics 1 to some degree, we don't spend time covering those units before the AP test at the moment because we want to spend the time on the actual AP curriculum that they're going to be tested on. So they don't tend to get as rigorous an education in those electricity units or those waves units as they did before anyway. So their education wouldn't really be very different at all under this new curriculum.
And that unit was added to the AP Physics 2 curriculum.
So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. So those units were in the AP Physics 2 curriculum for the most part anyway. The electricity units were in the AP Physics 2 to a more rigorous degree. They were in AP Physics 1, they're honestly to the most basic degree that College Board felt met some state standards. The only thing that's really truly added to the AP Physics 2 curriculum is a little bit more explicit work into mechanical waves, such as sound waves. And that's why they felt they wanted to move the fluids mechanics unit, which is the shortest unit of AP Physics 2, down to AP Physics 1.
Okay, thank you so much.
I was waiting to see where you were going to go with that. Mr. Peterson.
Hi, thank you for this. And like some of my other board members, anything to get more physics out there to more students, I'm in favor of. I'll try not to make my question so obnoxious then, but we'll see. I do have a question about the textbook and the course material timing. The proposed changes to the course documents, do they presuppose that we're using this textbook that we're buying?
No, the goal is to make sure that we change our curriculum so that the kids are prepared for the test next year. We'd like to have the textbook, but if it doesn't work out, we can use the current one we have.
Oh, fine, thanks. If you have a 2003 textbook, I totally understand why you might request that, but just in terms of making sure that we get everything timed. You know, and I also, looking through these, just to be very specific, these are the proposed changes that we have in front of us, correct? I might mention just to the administration, I've thought about this from time to time when we get these documents. It might be useful for us to have a red line in some of these cases. If there are changes, it would be easier for us to see what has shifted from the old to the new if we had that. Just an idea. All right, I'm going to ask one of my obnoxious questions so about the phenomenon-based approach. What do you do when you get to something like quantum mechanics? Right? I mean, like I understand, like you have like a no, like you want to have a bicycle and it's like F equals ma and it's rotational and all that stuff. But then like what phenomenon are you trying to explain with quantum mechanics?
We have a plan for that.
When you go out in the summer, do you wear sunscreen? The reason why you wear sunscreen is quantum mechanics. There are photons, very energetic light particles, that damage your skin cells. And we wear sunscreen to protect ourselves from the UVB and the UVC radiation that those photons are in. So that would be one example of phenomena we could use for quantum mechanics.
I understand that. How do you explain particle wave duality in terms of a phenomenon, right? It's such a high level concept, and it relates to exactly what you're talking about. That wave is propagating out in space until it lands on your neck, and at which point it becomes a particle. Like what?
That's basically.
And
it's a wave till it's not.
I'm going to let it go. I just, I will say in general, I'm a little suspicious sometimes of when we kind of take things down from the broad topics and link them in what I think is occasionally the wrong way. Because physics I have a great respect for and a great love for, and some of the things we're dealing with are about questions of existence, and it's kind of different than sunscreen. And I just keep some of the majesty in it. I guess this is what I'm getting down to.
so to get to your question, I think to rephrase it a bit, I think what you're getting more at is more like the interpretations of quantum mechanics. The NGSS curriculum specifically draws the boundary at looking at when it's better to look at light as a particle and when it's better to look at it as a wave. So it's not really both.
We can continue this offline.
Yeah, you don't want to get me started on this one.
So I've taught 6 through 12 science. I've taught earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics. I'm certified in 4 different sciences. The one thing that is a constant is how interconnected everything is. You cannot talk about the tectonic plates smashing into each other to create the Rocky Mountains without talking forces. You can't talk about that without talking about heat and convection that's going on in the mantle. And then you can't talk about that without talking about how do we know there's a mantle, which all comes back to physics. So adding these earth science concepts in isn't so much to me an addition, it's just a path. So yes, they're going to learn all this stuff about the earth and all this stuff about space, but really it comes down to physics.
All right, I'm gonna step back here. I apologize for taking up the board's valuable time.
Mr. Peterson, if you ever retire from the Board of Education and looking for something to do,
Just wait till the English department comes before us.
Ms. Kelly?
I just have a hopefully much easier and now embarrassing question. But I know you said the textbook is more of a wish list kind of, and you can still do it without it. But if we could have a ballpark number of what that is before the budget, and get that before, I'm just not comfortable.
Meaning if it's different from what's in here?
I saw 2,000 for.
32,000.
Oh, I missed the 32,000. Sorry, I saw the 2,000 for, I guess it was curriculum development. Sorry, so I missed the 32,000. That's it. I don't need another number.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobson?
Hi, thank you. I just had a quick question on the prerequisites in terms of not so much the AP2, but in comparison the AP1 to just the regular physics. It almost seems like we have more prerequisites to take the physics than we almost do for the AP. So I was just wondering if you just explain why we would need either completion or currently enrolled in 10th grade chemistry, environmental chemistry, or AP chemistry, and Algebra 1 to take Physics 1.
Yeah, that's it. The way that prerequisite is written is that it's because that's the path that students have to take to get there anyway. That the physics course isn't open to students in 10th grade. That's really what that's saying. It's an 11th grade.
But AP is.
AP is open if they take it in addition to a chemistry class, if they want to double up.
Okay, all right. So
We have some students who are very enthusiastic about science and want to take every AP science class they can. So a lot of times they end up doubling up, and that's a path for them. But generally, 10th grade is all chemistry.
okay, but just to be clear, you're not requiring concurrent enrollment in chemistry in 10th grade as a.
So with the changes in the curriculum, the way NGSS is structured is in a lot of ways it's very circular. It builds on itself as you go. So in order for students to really access a lot of these earth science standards, they have to have a basic understanding of stuff that's established in chemistry or environmental chemistry. So, like we talk about with rocks moving, heating things up, there's standards that are split between chemistry and physics, where the introduction to the standard happens in chemistry or environmental chemistry, and then we continue and build up and finish it off in physics.
No, appreciate that. I'm just wondering if the AP prerequisite 1 should actually also therefore then include the concurrent or completion of chemistry.
So AP1 does not require the same level of background in chemistry, so that's why it's not required.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to understand. It seemed very different for the two.
Well, and I do believe if you refer to one of the other slides, I believe all 10th graders have to take chemistry anyway. So we could put that chemistry is required to be concurrent with AP Physics 1 or completion, but I think that would wind up being a moot point because they have to take it in 10th grade anyway. They were taking chemistry?
We don't require any chemistry classes.
My
So
mistake.
right now, all our 10th graders take either environmental chemistry, or AP chemistry. I think what you're saying is we should just have it parallel. If it's in one of if it's in physics,
Me
Yep.
being picky about.
I understand what you're saying, is it should be written in parallel, and I think we could do that the same. I think we could update that. Yep. It's either, it should be in both places, or it should not be in both places. I agree 100%.
The same question for the music one, but it will come back again around then. But thank you.
Ms. Guernsey?
Sorry, just one last question. For students that are leaving the new honors physics or college prep physics with a lot of enthusiasm, what would be the next sequence of physics course that they would go to from either or both of those courses?
If that was a student of mine and they asked me, what I would tell them is they probably would want to consider AP Physics 1 as the next course. If they do happen to have taken calculus their junior year, I might tell them they might want to consider AP Physics C, but consider some additional prep time, because usually the expectation is you'd complete AP Physics 1 as well. So I can only speak to what I would say to my students.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on.
All right, moving forward and keeping the momentum going, we do have a new course proposal as well. Not an update. What is brought forward is a first reading of a curriculum document for a new elective in the science department, which is the physics of music. In your packet, you have the curriculum as well as some supporting documentation in terms of enrollment by high school, as well as student requests over the past year at each high school for the science courses.
So we are excited to propose to you a new half-year elective, physics of music. And as somebody previously said, everybody should get more physics in their life. I'm going to let Ms. Costin and Mr. Apgar speak more to this course.
So in Fairfield, we have a lot of students who are very interested in music and also hopefully interested in physics, and we'd like to get them a bit more of a background of physics and music, because music really is physics, and there's so much physics that does go into music. So we'd like to give students the opportunity to learn about those, since especially, like we said, the waves and sound, where you might actually cover music, was removed from AP Physics 1 and was removed from our older Physics 40 course. So students lost that opportunity to learn about that. So, and as an elective science course, I'll allow them to easier fit it into their schedule if they would like to learn about those things. And we've even been talking with some of the music department. They're very enthusiastic to let us use their space and all their wonderful instruments they have to help.
So before she goes, I just want to add one other thing. So the idea of this is a true elective course. It's for students who are interested, as an upperclassman, maybe interested in science, or maybe somebody who not typically would think that they want to take more electives in science, but they're musically inclined. And this is the thinking we had behind this was that it was really an interdisciplinary course. And I will pass it on to Ms. Costin to finish.
So we are musicians in the science department, particularly in the physics. So when we started talking about ideas of what would we love to teach, this course is what came to be. And when students, we kind of said, what would you think of a course like that? They said, that would be amazing. So we kind of ran a little bit. Very much on board. So what we're hoping to accomplish with this course is really get students not just into sound and music, but also instrumentation. How do different instruments work? Why can you tell the difference between a flute and a clarinet and a drum, even if they're all playing the same note? Why can you record sound and then replay it? And sometimes it's really good quality, and sometimes it's a little pitchy. So how does all that actually work? So if we look at the unit overviews, we'll kind of give you a little summary of what the course looks like.
So in our first unit, we'll be covering the topic of mechanical waves. This one is probably the one that winds up a bit more mathy of all this stuff. These are the topics that we usually would cover in the older AP Physics 1 curriculum or the older Physics 40 curriculum. And it's really just the basis of everything that we're going to use for the rest of the course.
The second unit is structure and function of instruments. So we're really looking at not just physical instruments, but also your vocal cords. How do you sing a song? Then the end of quarter project, they'll be analyzing a family of instruments and then explaining and producing sound on those instruments, thanks to our music department's willingness to collaborate with us.
And then the third proposed unit would be reading, hearing, and acoustics. So, recording, hearing, and acoustics. So how do we record music? If you look at guitar, you see an electric guitar, you see those pickups, and they've got those shiny metal parts. Those are magnets because there's magnetic fields that are resonating in the strings. And microphones have a similar device in there called a transducer that takes those sound vibrations and turns them into electricity so you can record those.
And we'll also be talking about the structure of the ear and how do you actually hear. And the final project will be students actually creating an instrument, analyzing the sounds it creates, creating a piece that is ideally played on that instrument, selecting a location within the school to play it in that would give the best acoustics, and analyzing why that occurs. Why is it best to play it there instead of the gym?
Great example of acoustics. Why do you always sound so great when you sing in the shower? It's all down to physics.
So overall, we are hitting some of the NGSS standards here, but really we're expanding beyond them. This is an elective course. We are using physics in context with all things music. And we are very much looking forward to seeing students kind of model and explain sound in all sorts of different ways, because it's all physics. We all want students to love physics.
And I'll finish up with this. So we estimate the cost of this new elective to be approximately $1,400 for the curriculum development costs. We don't expect this to impact staffing, and we don't expect material costs beyond our normal instructional supply spending that we normally spend annually. At this point, we're happy to take questions regarding the physics of music proposal.
Yeah, thanks very much. So I guess what would your goal be in terms of how many classes are you thinking or hoping to start out with, I guess? I mean, obviously, I know it's driven by demand, but just what are you kind of thinking in terms of where this might be in terms of how many classes that you would like to or be able to offer?
So I think it's an elective, first of all, so you're not having huge numbers of students enroll. I also think that whenever a course is new, initially the enrollment tends to be pretty small. So I think we'd be happy for a section or two in each building the first year that we propose it. But, and there's only so many things that students can fit in their schedule, and there's only so many electives they can take. But we know that our current science program, we don't have any electives that are aligned kind of more towards the physics concepts. So we were hoping to provide an opportunity for students that were really interested in this. And that's where it came out of.
And what would the minimum class size be for you to run this? Like, how many students would you need to be able to?
It's always a good question. We don't have a minimum number right now for courses. In terms of the other ones we offer, we look at what is needed in the student schedule. If it's running, of course, we always want to look, I would say, above 15, but we know that doesn't always happen based on where the class falls and what's needed in terms of credits. I can't give a hard number at this point until we set those standards as a district for courses running at the high school.
Okay, and then just one more question. So just in terms of the course materials, like what will the students be working from? I mean, I know there's not a textbook or anything like that, but just what kind of materials will be used in the class?
So we in physics are very good at making use of what's available to us. So our goal would be to essentially keep student material spending as low as possible by using recycled and found materials. that they can find in their home or that we have in the building already, and just give them kind of a set amount. So as far as new materials, we haven't fleshed that out yet because we haven't done the full curriculum, but we don't assume it would be anything but beyond normal instructional supply spending for a course.
And I will add that we already have a good amount of physics materials in our buildings. Tuning forks. We have tuning forks. We would use tuning forks here. So we have a lot of the materials that are already existing from previous courses, as Mr. Apgar mentioned, which used to be in Physics 1. We have those materials already.
Thank you.
Ms. Guernsey?
Oh, thank you. I'm just thinking about the accessibility to this course and wondering if there's a reason that you're limiting it to grades 11 and 12, and for two reasons. One, I know there might be a lot of students that would be interested in adding this to biology or chemistry, right? And that would have had Algebra 1 already. And then I'm also wondering if you see this in any way as a gateway to encourage, students that would be introduced to this earlier then might have time to take another physics course after it. So those are two of my thoughts, and just would love to hear your response.
Sure. I think most important from my perspective is that students take the course, students receive their core science learning, right? I think freshmen coming in, they have certain core courses they have to take. They don't have a lot of room for electives. There are a lot of elective choices already, so I just didn't, when we were planning it out, we were thinking that this is for a student that wants to go above and beyond after receiving the core, if that makes sense, versus it becomes a very different course when it's a freshman who hasn't had 9th grade science, 10th grade science, versus a student that's been through our high school program for a couple of years and has had instruction around analyzing and interpreting data, and engaging in argumentation and all those other skills, scientific skills that we build in 9th and 10th grade.
Mr. Peterson?
Hi, thank you. I'll keep this one a little more streamlined. The thing that I was kind of curious to see with this is whether it was going to be a true interdisciplinary course where you could take, from a standpoint of graduation requirements, either as a half credit for arts or half credit for science. Was there ever any thought about doing a course in that way? I mean, a million years ago when I was on the policy committee, we talked about creating courses that could fit in multiple buckets, and this is one that I could see kind of going over the line, especially since at the end of the course you're having them make an instrument and perform a piece. But was that ever a consideration? Although I am also sensitive to the comment that you made that there are not many pure physics electives, and that might take away from this. It just seems like this is kind of a golden opportunity for that.
I agree. It's a great opportunity to have an interdisciplinary course. I guess I don't know what the structure is for bridging the development of that of an interdisciplinary course. Granted, we did work on this as a science department, so I love the idea, and I think I don't know. I agree it could be really great, but
May I comment? I think if I'm inferring your question right, is whether or not this can fill two boxes if students are taking it, the humanities credit and the science one.
Yes.
So I think it is something we could look at in terms of putting it into the program of studies, and we'll get together and look at that and make sure we get back to the board before a vote on this course, so that if it is approved, it goes into it.
I mean, I guess in regard to that, I would not want to. I mean, I think that there would need to be a balance in the course material if that's the case. I mean, and it's not really the course that you designed here, but you're kind of really close to it. And you were talking about working with the music department, and it seems like there's an opportunity there, but I'll just leave that and you can do with it what you will.
Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation. This physics of music, I know many students would jumped to take this class. And it's exciting to think that we'd be able to provide this opportunity to just hear our teachers, the excitement in presenting it. I think that your passion, what you'll bring to your students is really what it's all about. So thank you for the presentation and look forward to learning more. I agree with Mr. Peterson in terms of furthering, looking at this particular elective, working with the music department, if not right out of the gates, as it moves forward, if it's approved by the board. I think it's definitely worth a deeper dive. Ms. Maxicanelli?
Yeah, and to your point and Mr. Peterson's point, it could very well be that the best path forward is to do it as the straight physics course for the first year out, and then to figure out a way to bring in that, because I wouldn't want to, give the humanities music aspect of it short shrift, and I do think someone needs to own this. And right now, it would be science. So maybe the first year wouldn't be the year to do it, but then to be able to move to that, because I do agree, it presents a wonderful opportunity.
Agreed. And I wouldn't want you necessarily to rush it, just to do it with fidelity. But thank you, and I look forward to hearing more. And if, as always, if board members have any questions or comments, please just forward them to Dr. Tracy, and he can forward it along to the team. Thank you. Okay, moving on, summer boost update. Dr. Tracy, any initial comments?
Just briefly, Dr. Parrish has prepared a report for you on this topic, and Ms. Mary Dolan Collette and Mr. Peter Shanazu are here to tell you how it went. Thanks, folks.
Good evening. We are here to present a summary of the Summer Boost program that ran this past summer. This is the second session of this program. It was previously board funded, but was limited to a K-2 literacy program with the ability to utilize the ESSER II funds. We were able to expand the program to be a K-8 interdisciplinary program that ran for 17 days this past summer. Mary served as the building principal for the elementary program that ran at McKinley, and Pete served as the principal for the program for the upper grades that ran at Fairfield Woods. So I will turn it over to them in terms of providing you an update. Just an FYI, in terms of the actual performance data that we usually provide in reference to Boost, it will be included as a part of the October 25th student data review. So that information will be broken out specifically for Boost with respect to their performance on those assessments.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight, and we are excited to share about our 17 days this summer in Boost. Just as a quick review, the goals for Boost were continued this summer, where we were identifying students who were at the cusp of meeting grade level expectations or just there, and we were going to be choosing them following a criteria where they were meeting or just below meeting grade level expectations. They were selected by their teams in their schools. Invitations were sent out, and then those students who agreed to come to Summer Boost were then invited, and we put them into classrooms, et cetera. So the goal, again, was we invited students who were close to meeting goal, but definitely had the work ethic, the potential, and were ready to strengthen those skills over the summer.
So then once we identified which students were going to be in the programs, we went into some program design, which we really wanted to make it an interdisciplinary type of project-based curricula, which we did focus that on, and each different grade level from K through 8 had a different project-based learning to go with it. Once we got to the middle school, we also realized that some of the project-based didn't have quite as much math as we would like, so we ended up having a push-in math teacher to, deal with math mostly towards STAR or toward the summer math packet for about 45 minutes each session.
So this summer in the elementary summer school boost, we were able to add an additional teacher, which was a math teacher. So the students attending boosts engaged in reading, writing, math, and STEAM lessons daily. And the goal of each of those lessons was to strengthen their current skills and exposing them to new skills that they would then encounter at the beginning of their next school year. We also had a social worker who provided SEL lessons based upon the Mind Up curriculum in Fairfield, and they were 2 sessions a week per classroom, 20 minutes, focusing on mindfulness. We did worry boxes, how to make friends, how to solve problems. So each grade level was able to focus on age-appropriate social and emotional learning, but it was often a repeat of what they had during the school year, so they could now practice it with new friends, a new situation, in a new classroom, because all of the children were pulled from around the district, so they didn't really know each other. So within that 17 days, it was a perfect way for them to practice those social emotional skills. We did have a language arts specialist on staff daily, and she worked to plan, co-teach, pull small group, and work with students to, again, build those skills and to help the teachers make sure that they were planning small groups that were effective in meeting the needs of the students. We also had a math specialist. We did not have a math specialist the previous summer, so it was great to have a math specialist on site to really help navigate some of the math that we were doing with our students, because there was variation in each classroom of math ability. So when we needed to ramp it up, the math specialist was able to come in and really focus on differentiating that instruction so that the students were really getting the math that was appropriate to their skill set. So our curricula, for the elementary school, we kept it the same as the previous summer. The kindergarten teams worked on dinosaurs. We researched dinosaurs. We learned about how weird dinosaurs, what their habitats were. And then the students created their own dinosaur and then a habitat that the dinosaur would live in. So we would have dinosaurs that had pink feathers or that maybe were glittersaurs, but it was all based upon what they learned about real dinosaurs and where real dinosaurs would live based upon, you know, how they were built, what their teeth were like, what they had long necks. So they were really doing some creative thinking around, well, if I was going to create a dinosaur based upon what I know about dinosaurs, what can I create? What would that habitat look like? Second grade, the pollinator unit, big hit. The kids loved the pollinator. They know every bug that was outside of McKinley School. McKinley School has a wonderful garden, and so they were out in that garden looking at bugs, understanding what was pollinating and how it was pollinating. We were able to bring in some members of the community to talk about pollinators. One as a student who had graduated from McKinley, and he was very excited about teaching our learners about planting trees, about the importance of bees and wasps. And it was, again, one of those units that at first we were like, oh, pollinators, this ought to be good. And it was really great, and the kids loved it. They made their own field guides. They, like I said, I've never collected dead and alive bugs. We couldn't, oh, there's a bug. We got to save that for Miss Spring's second grade class. Third grade was bridges. This was the most collaborative around bridges this year, where the students worked in teams of 3 or 4. They spent the first 2 weeks studying different types of bridges, how to build those bridges, what was the purpose of each design. And then collaboratively, they worked in teams to choose a bridge that they were going to build. They practiced it, building it with different materials, a lot of trial and error. And then once they decided and came up with a model that worked, They named it. They put, dedicated to whomever their bridge was named after. They could name what kind of bridge it was, how they built it, and why it was built the way it was. And they were able to, which was new this year, they did an oral presentation as a team. So they researched, they created the bridges, they presented to their classmates, they presented to the other classes in the Boost program. And on the last day, we did have parents come in for classrooms to present their projects. And these kids had pamphlets, they had quizzes on vocabulary. The bridge really was a big hit with our third graders. And finally, our playground design. Our fifth grade started out at being a larger number, and then due to different circumstances, the class shrunk to about 14 kids. So they built one playground, and the amount of work and thinking that went around building this playground so that it was accessible to all students, all children who might be using that playground of all different ages. There was a lot of negotiation between the students of what this was going to look like, who was going to work on what part. But when they presented it, it was masterful. They really understood what it meant to create a playground for a community, for that all students could engage in playing on that playground and the safety aspects of it. So again, this year, each of the units were well received and highly engaging for our learners.
And then when we moved to the middle school, we have the fifth graders create a solar oven and learned about some space stuff. They even made some solar glasses so that they could go out and see what the sun looked like for themselves without having to really squint. And it wouldn't hurt their eyes at all. And then they made solar ovens, and then they brought in like s'mores and things of that nature to make, actually cook their own food, which they were thrilled about. The sixth graders designed their own middle school, where they designed everything about the middle school. They got to pick which staff was going to be important, how many custodians they wanted, how many rooms they were going to have, discipline policies and procedures, what was lunch going to look like, what do they want to have in the lunch, and they investigated lunches around the world. Optimal class sizes, pretty much everything that goes into a middle school, they designed it. Seventh graders did something similar, but they created a summer camp, and they really talked about the crux of, if we're going to have parents or guardians pay for their children to go to a summer camp, what would their pitch line be? How would they get the parents to send their kids? How much should it cost? Where would it be? When would they have snack? What would a regular day look like? And they had a lot of fun with that. And then the eighth graders were really focused on what their identity, they were doing a lot of SEL work and talking about and they created a website about themselves and their identities, and they talked to their parents and guardians about their heritage and where they came from, and really made a nice presentation. And on the last day, we had Drs. Tracy and Parrish and some of the curriculum leaders come through and do a kind of a gallery walk for all 4 grades and just see what the kids were able to design. And they had a lot of fun with it, and we had a lot of fun that last day. It was a good. I thought it was very well received by the kids and everyone that came through. So here we have just some exemplar projects. Some of them are linked, but I don't know if the hyperlinks are going to work here. So, but they are there to be seen. And we have some pictures.
Yeah, these are some pictures. I did neglect to mention, we also had a full-time English language learner teacher who came to us from the middle school, and her dream job was elementary. And she was so integral in every part of our day. She dressed up every day. We had to dress up, every day, a different theme. But she really was such an impactful staff member, because we had a number of students who were English language learners, whose parents also were English language learners, and she really helped with the communication, between the parents and the school. She was in the classrooms fostering the connection between the curriculum and the learner so that they could access the teaching and learning. And again, she was just definitely worth mentioning, and it was a position this year that the summer before, the young woman was lovely, very good, but she wasn't exactly an English language learner teacher the way we had envisioned. And Miranda, Roxana Miranda, who is this woman here, did a phenomenal job, and in every classroom, making sure she knew every student and that they were able to access and participate in all of the projects that we were doing. This is the Pollinator Pathways that came during that first week and really set the students up for being excited about pollinators. And this is just, again, some small group work around word study, phonics, read aloud, researching the dinosaurs. I believe those are most of our kindergartners there. We also had access to Lexia, which is a program that is used during the school year last year that we were able to use this summer, which is a program on the computer that students can log into. We had certain classrooms log in twice a week for 20-minute phonics practice and skill building. We had a lot of small group work in the area of math and reading to really, again, focus in on those priority standards, but also to strengthen what the skills the students had so that they would be ready to receive the new teaching and learning that they would be getting in the fall in their next grade. Oh, there's Dr. Parrish. She came often. It was wonderful to have her there reading with our students. There you are. Again, just a lot of small group. That's our 5th grade team. We had a dynamic team in 5th grade of experienced, 4th grade, experienced 5th grade teacher and a 6th grade reading teacher. So that group of rising 5th graders had phenomenal instruction throughout their day on reading, interpreting, analyzing, and taking data through math and reading.
And then here we have some of our middle schoolers using their solar glasses and doing some investigation in the library while they're trying to look up various things for their presentations. And you can see in the middle, they're working on their camp project, and on the far left, the 8th graders are working on their identities and just trying to draw a picture that they think describes them for that day. And then on the right, we have the 5th graders using their Chromebooks in math. I asked some of the teachers just to send me some thoughts or some ideas that they would like to share with the board that they thought were particularly successful. And it did have a nice feel to it. All of the teachers said that they really loved the kids. They had a lot of fun. There's a lot of smiles, as they says, a lot of energy. The kids were working on their own skills, make them better students, and a lot of them just said that they had a really nice dynamic in the classroom where the kids just formed some good bonds together.
So enrollment and attendance for the elementary school was concerning when we actually began to look at the numbers, but during the summer. Now, Dr. Parrish had talked about the previous early literacy program. I was also the principal of that program. And we would have some attendance issues. They were K1, 2, but typically once we got all the students in, the regulars came regularly. We didn't have any issues. Last year, our attendance was good. It was decent. Most of the kids came. If they were out, it was just due to a one-day illness or a camp trip. This year, out of 141 students in the summer elementary program, we had about an average of an 85% attendance daily. That was concerning, and so we put a process in with our school secretary, so she would call every day if they weren't in school. We took attendance. She would call every day. She would say, you know, why aren't you here, or are you sick, what have you. But she would ask them why they aren't there, if they were planning to come back tomorrow. She would remind them that we did have a no absence policy where unless you're sick, you really need to make every effort to be at the school. And what we found collecting this data was we did have a number of students early on, at the beginning of our program and at the end, with COVID-like symptoms, so they would miss 5 days. We did have families take a family trip, even though we did request that they not take vacation. However, they didn't tell us they were taking. They would go on their family trip. We'd call, we wouldn't get anyone. So I'd get ready to send the email, okay, we're going to withdraw you from the program, you've missed 4 days, and then they'd show up. And so there's this little face at the door, we weren't going to send them home. And then finally, we are due to have children come to the summer boost. Then they go and they take the bus, or their parents take them to the recreation playground camp for the second half of the day. That camp has some really lovely field trips. One is Lake Compounce, I believe, and the kids really want to go to that one. And so I think it's one of those things that parents let them go, and so that added to our attendance. So we did not have the attendance that we were hoping, but those children that did come, and the ones that went on vacation came back, and they were really excited to be back. But the students that came with Fidelity, I believe, really did maximize the learning that was offered and provided for them at Boost.
And the middle school had smaller attendance, just student-wise. We only had 50 students enrolled in the program. I believe it's 92%, as 92.69 as far as average daily attendance, but I believe 44 kids had perfect attendance. There were, the other 6 were, one kid mom came and said that she was enrolling him in a summer literacy program for 1 week at Fairfield U. It seemed like a good thing to miss for, so I wasn't going to boot him from the program. He was very enrolled, but he missed 1 week. But I thought that was a valid reason to miss. There were some other kids that just unfortunately got sick, but I think 44 out of 50 having perfect attendance, I was very happy with that. But overall, we had very few discipline problems, and it went fairly smoothly.
So in conclusion for this summer Boost program, we had very energetic teachers. Many of our teachers were, I'd say about 4 or 5, were brand new. So this was their first teaching experience. So they brought a great deal of energy and excitement to the program. The kids were really looked forward to our daily themes. They couldn't wait to invite their parents in, which we weren't able to do the summer before, so they could showcase their projects and see each other's projects. And overall, the students who did attend with Fidelity, I believe, really got the most out of the program, because when they left on that last day, they all said, a lot of kids say, I'll see you next year. Can't wait to see you next year. So, we're hoping we don't see them next year. We want them to be able to grow these skills, but they really felt good about themselves as learners and leaders in our program.
From the middle school side, I would say having only 50 students as compared to the elementary of 141, I think that's a product of the students themselves in middle school just not wanting to go to summer school. I just think that's just the nature of the beast. And when you have kindergarten, first, second graders, I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old at home. They are excited to go to school, but by the time they get to middle school, or especially high school, as upcoming 9th graders, they didn't want to spend a summer in school. We as a team from year 1 to year 2 really felt that we needed to ramp up the rigor in the program, and we did ramp up the rigor. There was a lot more rigor across all of the grade levels at the middle school, but I think that made it have a more school-like feel to it, and then some of the kids at the end were like, it just kind of felt like we still went to school. So I think it was a really good program. I think it worked well. I think the kids that were there for every class really benefited from it. But I think the low attendance numbers is just, as far as just enrollment numbers, is just because middle school kids don't want to go to summer school. So that's just my final thoughts on it. And we're happy to field any questions that you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. Ms. Kelly.
Hi. This might be a question more for Courtney, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. Do we know how much we spent on the Summer Boost program? Do we know what the dollars were on that? Okay, if you don't have it right now, it's fine. And then when you talk about the attendance numbers, the 141 and the 50 for K through 4 and 5 through 8, is that the same number as the number of children that were invited to the program? So do you have those numbers, and can we see what the differential is there? Because then my next follow-up question is, what, if anything, do we do for the kids that didn't come?
So we previously provided the board the number of students who were invited to the program. It was broken down by grade level, so that was previously provided. I can send it around again, but I don't have the numbers here in front of me. But that did not, the number of invitations far exceeded
Right,
the
which I
number
was
of
assumed, and
students that actually
I apologize
attended.
because I do remember you giving it to me. I just don't have it with me, and it's probably in a pile in my kitchen somewhere. But again, the follow-up question to that is, do we have a plan for those kids that just didn't come?
So there wasn't an alternative program. There wasn't one in the previous year either. So there wasn't a specific alternative program that was created for those who weren't able to attend during the summer. So any additional supports that they may need would be provided during the school day, as it typically is, through the SRBI process.
Mr. Asa.
I had a similar question to Ms. Kelly regarding the comparison, just for ease of sight and seeing it on a sheet with the one versus the other. But the other question I have regarding the attendance, so it was mentioned that the fifth grade notably shrunk. These numbers, I assume the 141 and the 50 were the attendance at the start or at the end of the program, taking into consideration the ones that actually dropped out.
Right, so the 141 does not count the students who dropped out. So that was, the fifth grade shrunk considerably. We had the attendees, they were coming, and then on the first day, they weren't there. So we made phone calls, oh, we're in South Carolina, oh, so they decided not to come. So they withdrew without letting us know. So we had lost about 8 rising fifth graders in that beginning of that first week. A couple of them were due to transportation. That was another, because we were housed at McKinley families needed to bring their children themselves to the program or bring their children to a site closer to them, such as maybe Holland Hill or another school, and get the bus that's provided from that home school to McKinley. And for some families, and it happened to be in the rising fifth grade, that wasn't going to work. They had an assumption that bus transportation would be from their home.
Okay.
And that's the same for the 50 that we had. That's the ending number for those that didn't drop out. And almost all of them were dropped out at the beginning, either for transportation reasons or students somehow enrolled in the program, but their parents didn't know that they actually enrolled in the program and didn't know to show up. So in that first week, we lost a bunch of students.
Okay, so just to be clear then, what I'm hearing is these numbers do not include those students. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Guernsey.
Thank you for clarifying the grades. I actually had a question about were the fifth graders like rising sixth graders, or just interpreting that was hard for me.
So
because
all of these are the low numbers. So when it says K through 8, it's really kindergartners becoming first graders up to 8th graders becoming 9th graders.
Oh.
So we just use their current year of school because it was still the same school year.
Oh.
So when it
okay,
says
so
5th through 8, it was 5th graders becoming 6th, 6th becoming 7, 7 becoming 8, and 8 becoming 9.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. So I still didn't understand, but now I do. Thank you. So in terms of the enthusiasm for the middle school, that was kind of dropping out because it was like school. Was there a difference, did you see, between that grade 5 and 6 versus 7 and 8?
Oh, absolutely. The 5th graders were definitely more engaged and really bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when they walked in. The 8th to 9th graders are like, oh, we're here, but we're here. And they made the most of it once they walked in, but they didn't have the same smile, because I was greeting everybody at the door as they walked in. They didn't quite have the same smile as the fifth graders getting off the bus.
Yeah, thank you.
Mrs. Gerber.
Just for everyone's information, the numbers with the invited and accepted is from the Friday packet dated July 8th. So, and I mean, it breaks it out by school and everything, but overall it was 602 total students were invited and 209 accepted. And that was the July 8th date. So that just gives you a sense.
And that's total for both elementary and middle. So we went from 209 to 191.
Thank you, Mrs. Gerber. Ms. Rotelli.
Listening to the presentation and seeing all the classes and it brought everything back to me to when my kids went to summer programming about a decade ago at McKinley. And one with an IEP, one not. Back then, they had a program. I'm sure some other people's kids went. It was packed. They had tons of fun classes to pick from. It was very targeted with sort of reading for superheroes, and they combined certain PE classes with like a ballet teacher, and I mean, everything was. It was summer school, but it was fun, and it didn't feel like walking. And now I don't know what it's like for the middle school. That program fell by the wayside. I don't really know what happened to it over the years. It was a program where our children, our typical children, and our children with disabilities were interacted together. They took classes. Usually that was a PPT decision, and the parents got to pick which classes the kids participated in, and they got to interact with each other. It felt much more like a typical school year. They got to meet friends from all over the district, obviously, but it was housed at McKinley. And I think about what an opportunity there might be to combine a lot of this moving forward, getting much more participation, bringing back some of it as really a fun sort of summer camp opportunity, but it's really summer school, and bringing some of that learning in, getting our SPED population mixed in with typical peers, which is typically something that is ideal for them anyway, instead of isolating them to just themselves in a separate building. So moving forward, whatever the boost looks like, I would hope that we might be able to sort of reinvent summer programming for all of our kids, and maybe combined and expand this to make it more palatable for everyone.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, just one question regarding staffing. I know you mentioned that some of the teachers were brand new teachers. How difficult was it to get staff for this program?
It was challenging because we had, last year, we had the same thing. I had a few of the staff from the early literacy follow me up and say, yeah, let's do this. But then I had to fill in with other teachers. This year it was the same. This year was actually a little bit harder because some of my key teachers decided to take the summer off or go on vacation, et cetera. I am an adjunct instructor at Sacred Heart University, so I was able to actually pull some of my graduate students, and I'll say, hey, you know, I have some positions. I'm pretty impressed with your work. We were hiring right until the end of the school year. We hired some really fantastic first-year teachers, but it was challenging. We took some teachers who were looking to get hired here in Fairfield, but they were coming to us from New York, and so we were able to fill those positions, but we worked really to the very last hour. Really, people in my own building, hey, you know, 17 days, you'd really be great at it. But it wasn't easy to fill all of those positions, and it was a lot of connection that I had, or that I could get someone they liked me enough that, come on, you're going to have a great summer. But the impact of that is, out of all the staff members, I had 7 who'd never taught before. So with that, required a great deal of my time, which is good, but teaching them and going in there and making sure that they were supported by the math specialist and the reading specialist. So we had some great resources, but we did have teachers who this was their very first time being fully responsible for the 12 students in their class, the reading, writing, and the math. And they did a great job. We've hired, well, I think we hired a couple in this district, and some did also get hired in other districts. But again, it was right to the very end, I think right the end of June, when I finally got everything staffed for the elementary, because it required more people.
On the other side, from the middle school perspective, because there was only one 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade class, I housed them with all FPS teachers that were all experienced, that had, I think every one of them had at least 15 years of teaching experience.
Thank you.
Mrs. Maxinelli.
Just one quick comment, and I don't know if you're going to be here in 2 weeks, and if you are not, then maybe it'll be questions that have to get answered later. But for me, much of this sounds wonderful, but until I find out how we achieved our goals, you know, I have to admit, I don't like the slide that says, I feel that, I feel that, I feel that. You know, we need to know that something of this was of value, or what it is that we want to keep. Because at the end of the day, we are making an investment in this, and I do not in any way denigrate the notion that kids were loving what they were doing. But for me, I'm just kind of holding off on any further reaction until we get the presentation in 2 weeks. But thank you so much for being here.
I think I echo that. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work. Thank you for bringing joy and fun to these students this summer. I wish I had the opportunity to come and see. I'm kind of curious what their ideal middle school looks like. If you have any of that information, it would be interesting to hear. To Ms. Rotelli's, just the program that she described, and I'm going to rely on my fellow board members, I believe that programming, there was a fee for that, the summer adventures, which is a little bit different than what we're offering right now, that this program was provided to these students who had a need without a cost to them. So I think moving forward, in terms of, and I agree, I mean, my son attended and it was fun.
Just to say that it was a nominal fee. It was very affordable to our students in town. But also, if Fairfield is going to continue to fund a boost program, it may be worth looking into funding it another way and giving access to everybody who can come.
Not debating that, I just wanted for the record that it just, the funding mechanism for the 2 programs were different.
And just to add to Mrs. Rotelli's point, one, having it be a tuition program, but then maybe also if it took on some of the characteristics of camp, of taking more of the day, whatever. But if that program structured that way had a lot of buy-in, it might be able to achieve the goals of this, bring it back. And I actually can't quite remember why it fell away. If it was just that the numbers went down, but I can't remember. So that would be worth knowing, because otherwise that might be a model that might be better to move towards.
I don't know, memory, I think the numbers were going down, and staffing might have also been a challenge, that it just wasn't cost effective to run it, but something to follow up. I don't want to put Dr. Parrish on the spot. And
no, I was just going to share that we did try to run the Summer Adventures program this past year, but the demand for it was too low to actually run the program. So that program, separate from Boost, was something that was revamped and offered this past year.
I don't recall seeing anything remotely similar to what I saw 10 years ago. Meaning, I remember that booklet that came out looked very much sort of like a Fairfield rec book that comes out with the different descriptions of all the courses. It was sort of very animated. It felt fun. It was easy to sit down with my elementary school typical child and even, and my other daughter, and just sort of look at the classes at what she might want to pick. I don't recall seeing that. Now, both of my children are in high school, but I do still talk to a lot of my SEPTA parents who miss that opportunity for their kids to be in that learning environment with their typical peers and sort of get their services and try to meet some of their goals in a fun environment instead of sitting around in a summer school classroom feeling like, oh, I'm stuck in summer school while my friends are at the Parks and Rec camp going to Quasi. And I guess I do kind of look at this, and I remember Mrs. Pitko mentioning a couple of times, and there, we might have had some side conversations about what we could do to partner with Parks and Rec and try to make this experience a more fun and enjoyable way for our kids to get the experience of the summer programming that they might need academically, but also feel like they're not missing out on a playground camp. So maybe there is a, field trip to Quasi at the end of the month of July they can look forward to through an academic program. I don't know. I'm not saying it didn't come out. I just don't recall seeing it. And maybe, maybe it just requires more. Was it billed for both SPED and typical peers, or just a paying Fairfield resident program?
So there's several programs that used to run. There was Project Adventures, as well as Safety Town, as well as ESY at that point. We did attempt to run Safety Town last year and didn't have enough applicants. I don't want to speak without the numbers, but for 1 week, so we did cancel that. Project Adventure, we didn't run or put out there because of the Boost program, but there were also financial considerations in making that decision as well. But understood it's something we can look at as an option moving forward with it.
And I believe they all three ran that at one point in time prior to the pandemic. You had the Boost program, you had Project Adventure, and you had Safety Town, which were, and then some students were able to go to Boost in the morning and then go to Project Adventure in the afternoon. It is the way that I've been told that it was handled previously.
Yeah, I remember the program at McKinley. It was a madhouse. It was a madhouse dropping your kids off in the morning. I remember going into the gym there. It would be packed. I mean, it really was very successful. I don't doubt that we could make it that successful again. I know there's been challenges over the years, but maybe worth digging into further.
Definitely a discussion point for the coming months of what to do next summer. But thank you for the presentation. We look forward to seeing the data at our next meeting. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to old business, approval of North Stratfield, Osborne Hill, and Fairfield Woods ed specs. Recommend a motion. The Board of Education, I'm going to take them all three together. The Board of Education approved the North Stratfield. We'll do them one at a time. The North Stratfield.
Waive the read.
Excuse me. No, we're going to. I'm just debating if we should do them bundled. But there's three different motions. So we're going to go with the first one. The Board of Education approved the North Stratfield ed specs. Could I have a motion? Ms. Maxicanelli, second. It's on the table. Any discussion? Mr. Peterson seconded.
And if I might, our Director of Construction and Energy Services, Mr. Morabito, is here to answer any questions you might have about the upcoming facilities items. Thanks, Sal.
Any questions about North Stratfield ed specs? Seeing none, any members of the public like to give public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Yes, you can.
And I apologize, I'm sure it was covered last week and I don't remember, our last meeting. Can you tell me the timing that we can expect on this and what also you would anticipate could possibly impact any of that timing?
The ed specs are for the application for the state grant. State grant goes in December 1st. They're expected to make awards or announcements first part of February is what they led us to believe. So if we are fortunate enough, it is a competitive grant for the HVAC program money. If we're fortunate enough to get a grant, we would go to, next step would be to go for our plan for our bidding on that project. And at that point, the work would have to be complete by December of 2024. Accepted by this board, complete.
Any other questions? Any members of the public? Again, no. To the board, all in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Next motion, the Board of Education approve the Osborne Hill Ed Specs. Mrs. Gerber, can I have a second? Ms. Guernsey. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, any members of the public like to give public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries 9-0. That the Board of Education approve the Fairfield Woods Ed Specs. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Ms. Jacobson. Any questions? Seeing none, any members of the public like to give comment? Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Moving on, approval of capital non-recurring and capital projects. Recommend a motion. The Board of Education approve the following capital non-recurring projects: North Stratfield Elementary School Vestibule Project, Osborne Hill Elementary School Vestibule Project, Fairfield Woods Middle School Vestibule Project, Fairfield Ward High School Boiler Burner Replacement Project, design only, Fairfield Ward High School Knaps Highway Tennis Courts and Basketball Court, design only, and the following capital project, Holland Hill Elementary School Partial Roof Replacement, design only. Mrs. Jacobson, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Morabito? Mrs. Maxinelli?
Just one quick question. Refresh my memory that the design-only capacity of this, was that because that's the expectation as the best we can do timing-wise, or is that a way of breaking up the cost?
For which one of them?
Well, there are three.
Okay. So for the Holland Hill roof replacement, we're getting into a cycle that we're getting the funding to do design this year for the following year roof replacement. So next year will be...
So that's like what we usually do with building projects?
Yes, sort
Okay.
of, so that we're getting the design up front, so we're trying to get the project ready so that we're taking better advantage of the bidding environment. We historically have been bidding, when I say historically, for the past, I want to say 6 to 8 years, we ended up bidding roofs not at the best time. We're bidding them in springtime. All the contractors are already booked for the summer, so you had a smaller pool of people competing for it. You're getting higher prices. We're trying to get everything ready and to stay grant approved much earlier, say November, so that we're bidding Christmas time, and hopefully we get a Christmas gift of a nicer price. The other projects, we wanted to get it fully developed. There's a lot more study in that before we actually decide what our ask will be for the construction.
Any additional questions? Bring it to the public. Invite any members of the public to give public comment. Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? Motion carries 9-0. While we have Mr. Morabito here, I'm going to ask for the board's unanimous consent just to move up 6A, approval of Fairfield Ward Ed Specs. Seeing no objection, can I put this motion? The Board of Education approve the Fairfield Ward Ed Specs. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mrs. Maxinelli. Mr. Morabito, would you just talk us through this new business item.
Okay, we're asking for these ed specs so that we can apply for this project, which has already been funded and designed. We're going to bid for the HVAC grant money. Once we, reason we didn't bring this forward before, because we didn't really have a good, clear understanding of the state rules on this new money. There was a seminar on the 30th, and truthfully, the state is, best way to say it is they're looking for shovel-ready projects, much, harken back to the early Obama administration. They're looking for something that's ready to hit the road as soon as they approve it. This project's all designed. We're doing a professional cost estimate on it and gathering all the paperwork, and this is part of the paperwork we need to bid for that state competitive grant. I think this one has a better chance of winning a competitive grant than the other ones, just because it's developed so much farther.
Thank you. Mrs. Maxinelli.
And just to be clear, that in winning any of this grant money, it's project-specific. It's not that they're going to agree to a pool of money that we then spend as we need to. It's very project-specific.
It's very project-specific.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, bring it to the public. Any members of the public? Back to the board for a vote. All in favor? Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you for moving that up.
Thank you, Mr. Morabito, for joining us in Mr. Papageorge's absence, and for just being forward-thinking and getting, doing all we can to hopefully maximize our chances of getting some of this state funding. Moving on, approval of course, yoga, mindfulness, and personal fitness 2. That the Board of Education approve yoga, mindfulness, and personal fitness 2. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Ms. Guernsey. Any questions, discussion? Ms. Kelly.
I just, this is more of a comment than anything else. I'm not going to be supporting this, and I just wanted to, it's not because I don't think it is a meaningful class, but I have some reservations about the staffing, and I know we were told that if we needed to get somebody else, I was a little uncomfortable with the answers of not needing someone specifically certified in either yoga or something with the certifications. Maybe at an entry-level class, I can see that. I think the example was given of, well, nobody's a badminton expert, which I totally get in a generalized PE class when badminton is one unit, but we're talking about a second-level class of yoga. So I would imagine, I would hope that we would expect a certain level of expertise in that class. So I'm all for all the benefits that were presented from the mindfulness and all that stuff, but I just don't think I can support this as it was presented.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, take it to the public. Any members of the public like to give comment on this? Seeing none, back to the board for a vote. All in favor? Mr. Telly, Ms. Jacobson, Ms. Guernsey, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Ms. Maxinelli, Mr. Peterson. All opposed? Ms. Kelly, motion carries 8-1. Moving on to the approval of course Advanced Pottery, that the Board of Education approve the Advanced Pottery course. Can I have a motion? Ms. Jacobson, seconded by Ms. Guernsey. Any questions? Seeing none, invite any members of the public to give comment. Seeing none, back to the board for a vote. All in favor? Mr. Telly, Ms. Jacobson, Ms. Guernsey, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Ms. Maxinelli, Mr. Peterson. All opposed? Ms. Kelly, motion carries 8-1. Moving on, approval of course, Advanced Sculpture. That the Board of Education approve the Advanced Sculpture course. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Ms. Guernsey. Any discussion? Questions? Bring it to the public. Any public comment? Seeing none, back to the board for a vote. All in favor? Ms. Vitale, Ms. Jacobson, Ms. Guernsey, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Maxinelli, Mr. Peterson. All opposed? Ms. Kelly. Motion carries 8-1. Adoption of policy 3542.43, business non-instructional operations food service charging. The Board of Education adopt policy 3542.43, business non-instructional operations food service charging. Ms. Jacobson, second by Mrs. Maxinelli. Any comment, questions? Ms. Maxinelli.
I received no questions from the board on this, so hopefully it was pretty straightforward.
Any questions? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, back to the board for vote. All in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Okay, approval of budget transfers. That the Board of Education approve 3 transfers amongst major classifications in the amount of $163,779 from support expense to personnel services to support the hiring of crossing guards, $689,829 from personnel services to pupil personnel to support the hiring of contractual para-educators to meet shortage needs in special education, and $44,200 from support expense to maintenance to fund a virtual firewall. Mrs. Gerber, can I have a second? Mr. Peterson? Any questions? Ms. Laborious, do you want to come up just in case? Of course, I'm going to make you come up and no one's going to have any questions. Or any comments? Ms. Maxinelli.
Couple questions, I think. Regarding the first expenditure,
Which this isn't your area of expertise, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. This obviously was not something that was the Board of Ed's idea, to be taking up the budgeting of crossing guards. What kind of litigation do we take on as responsibility because we're not security experts and now we are having to hire crossing guards? So the idea of it being in the Board of Ed budget as opposed to police budget. And is that something that we have to have any additional concerns about because we're in the education business and we are not in the security business in this nature? I mean, there's a reason that the security that are in our buildings, that those are not people that that's taken care of by the police department. So probably a good question for me to have sent people in ahead of time, and I apologize that it just occurred to me.
Good question, and I'll certainly look into it for you.
Yep. Mr. Ace, do you have any?
Just a follow-up on that. Mr. Papa George did discuss this with board leadership at the time regarding us bringing them in versus the contracted route because of what the bids were and everything. And I know there was a lot of talk between the district and the police department, and the police department is still handling the training of these people. And there is an officer that was doing that before that continues to do that. So I can't speak for Mr. Papa George, but I think if you send him that email, he'll be able to answer it because to the best of my recollection, those questions were raised by leadership and answered properly.
Number one, so thank you. I did not know that about the training, so that's very helpful to know. Again, I just worry about something, someone doesn't show up one day, we're having hard enough times with staffing. I mean, it is a litigation issue. Not that I want to keep talking about this anymore, put ideas in people's heads, but I find that very concerning that the district is taking this on. And then second, I know this was covered at the meeting, and I was trying to pay attention when I was on remotely, but I believe someone at the table asked it, and I just wanted to confirm for the second one regarding the paraeducators, is that once we arrange for this contract, we're in, so that even if we were able to do additional hiring of paras, we had a flood of interested and highly qualified applicants, we're still on the hook for this contract for the remainder of the school year. Is that correct?
That is what Mr. Mancusi reported, that the need was there for these paraeducators. We needed them immediately, so we hired them to fill the need, and it is for the school year.
No, I was never questioning the need. It was
that was
the bind.
I think it's important to put that on the record again, Mrs. Maxwell, that it is a commitment now for the year, and now we're just doing the budget transfer to. Go ahead, Mr. Asa.
Ms. Laborious, could you confirm this $689,000 that we're transferring? Has all of that been spoken for? Or are we doing this proactively so it's there for when we act, but we may not use it?
So we have contracted for 10, which is the equivalent of that amount. And then there's the plan to get an additional 2, which will be amended into the contract. Just to be clear, we only pay for what we use. And so we do currently have 8 on board, as I understand it, and 2 more in the process. So.
So to follow up on that, we pay for what we use, but once we bring a 1.0, if we'll just call it, on, and that becomes 9, then we are with that 9 for the rest of the school year.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
And we do have a process between myself and the Executive Director of HR, Mr. Mancusi, to look at that on a regular basis so we can see, the budgeted paraeducators, our status with the vacancies, and then the contract where those people are located and monitoring that on an ongoing basis, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Invite any members of the public to give comment on this motion. Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, Ms. Laborious. Okay, we did the policies. Okay. Discussion of BOE budget priorities. This is the time where invite board members just to share some of their initial thoughts for the upcoming budget year. If there's anything that you would like to see funded, the district, move forward for the next school year, now would be an opportunity to just share those ideas with the superintendent and staff as they are beginning the budget process. Mrs. Maxinelli, followed by Mr. Peterson.
Mine isn't quite a budget priority, or it's more reiterating, and I have always meant to go back through past documents and share them with Mr. Peterson and Finance, and maybe this is more of a charge to Finance Committee, but is really interested in a look back before we look forward, before we look to add, I'm going to give an easy example, more middle school mental health professionals. How are we handling the staffing now? So that I just want to kind of put staff on notice that before we spend more, how well have we examined our method of delivery for whatever it might be? Obviously, this is kind of more programmatic than anything else, but we've made an awful lot of investments in the past couple of years, and wanting to know that those are panning out. Maybe some of those could be pared back if they're not proving to be as successful. Maybe some things need to be diverted, but just hearing that as a thoughtful part of our conversation is something I'm very interested in.
Anyone else? Mr. Peterson, I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson, you were next.
Thank you. I kind of, again, not a funding request specifically, but a budget season request in terms of kind of what I'm looking for from administration. We talked about these things a little bit in Finance Committee, but I know an overarching theme this year is going to be any change due to inflation, and the degree to which in new budget requests we can separate that out. What things are going up because our costs are going up versus I think that in this current environment, a focus on that is going to be important, and may help us give context to whatever the top line number is as we sell it to town. So I will be looking for that information, and it's obviously going to be on a program by program, line by line basis, but I will want that. Also, something that I've been thinking about a lot since our last Finance Committee meeting, I would like some more color on, every year we deal with estimated retirements in terms of FTE, but some data that we saw in Finance Committee leads me to believe that we have not been doing a good job historically of estimating what the financial impact of those job turnover issues has been. In fact, we've underestimated the benefit to the district in many of the past budget cycles. So I would like to have more information about how we're going about making those estimates. Again, I think every budget season we talk about, are we getting the numbers of retirees correctly? And while that matters from a personnel standpoint, that's not the full story. So that's something that I'll be interested in watching as we go forward with the budget.
And I had a call in to the Finance Committee meeting as a follow-up to that. I think that when you're looking at that staff replacement, Mr. Dr. Rasmussen in years past, the formula was, the algorithm was on target. COVID kind of threw a wrench in it. But I think that I'd be interested in knowing the level that the teachers that we're hiring at in terms of staff replacement, because that's kind of where you're going to be seeing a change in the number. Mrs. Maxicanelli.
Once, I wasn't going to mention this, but since I did advocate for its change in the district improvement plan, I know it's in there explicitly, but this will involve some staff time during this school year, and that was a re-examination of our gifted and talented program in elementary school and middle school. I knew we weren't going to be able to have it fully for this year, so I believe that impacted how it was worded in the district improvement plan, but I am interested in seeing our commitment to that.
Anyone else? Ms. Jacobson.
So yeah, I'll echo too, just we have done some evaluation work recently, but not necessarily completed. So around SEL, we got an initial needs assessment and evaluation of what we're doing. So just going forward, if we're going to be paring that back or getting rid of something that might not be used as much and moving forward. Obviously, always important to me is maintaining as much maintenance as humanly possible into our budget. Maintaining our waterfall expectations in terms of our sports and equipment and the things that we've put into place will be something that I'll be looking to support going forward. And then just a new idea as we get a lot of capital requests, X hundred number of laptops, X number of desktops, whatever it may be. So perhaps we can get an idea from Mrs. Burns, if possible, at some point of a longer term plan versus maybe a year by year that she might foresee, knowing that obviously could be flexible because things break or whatnot, you never know, but almost like a waterfall itself too, as a kind of an idea, just because it's a lot of equipment and when are we going to need to refresh and just having a better handle because the refresh systems come and go too. So just a few ideas on that for me.
Ms. Kelly.
As evidenced, obviously, by some of my votes tonight, I have a real concern and would really like to see a little more analysis or reporting done on the class sizes, especially in the high school when it comes to electives. And not even just electives. I know that last year it was really not until towards the end of the budget season that we got a pretty long list with a lot of caveats of classes rolled up and whatever. So it was really kind of hard to really gauge what exactly we were running. There was no good summary of it, and I really think that would be helpful to kind of have almost like an informal audit of just what we ran with, I guess, this year, just to have. And then to me personally, it would be a little helpful to also see, because we keep hearing like, oh, well, if the class doesn't have enrollment, it doesn't run. And I think that would be helpful to also see what didn't run because the enrollment wasn't there. And how long does that class, quote unquote, stay on the books before it just goes away? So I think that would be helpful because, as you can tell, I am hesitant to approve or endorse any more electives because I really feel like there's a lot of cleanup that we could be doing there. I could be wrong, but I'm just, again, maybe because I haven't seen a report that would make me feel comfortable making these decisions, but that is something that would be very beneficial to me. Thank you. Selfishly, to me.
Anyone else? Sure. Actually, I have one. I have obviously the district improvement plan is a guide for any budget initiatives. I would be our early literacy program. We're rolling out the middle school block schedule this year. I'd be curious to know if there needs to be any additional supports, how that's going. The math, our accelerated math students this year, we have a plan for them for, not to bring up, a sore subject, but when we had the Math Academy, that did come with an investment. The board did not want to go with that route. I think that there was an appreciation for wanting to support these students, so I'm hoping that staff is working on that and would like to see that included in the next budget cycle. And information sooner. And now, Dr. Tracy, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for this. I'm scribbling as fast as I can. And just so that you know, and in consultation with Mr. Testani, I shared with our district leadership team last week that in light of the cost of simply carrying on the business, meeting insurance costs, meeting energy costs, meeting contractual obligations, inflation generally, as Mr. Peterson mentioned, and then the new superintendent's initiatives, most likely in the area of literacy, and then my own gut feeling about what the traffic will bear from both this board and from the town. All of that taken together caused me to say to my colleagues that while we are certainly open to new ideas and new spending proposals, that those need to be accompanied by offsetting reductions so that we have a number that can be presentable to you and ultimately to the town. So that was the message that went out. Don't hesitate to have new ideas, but please, with every new dollar you see as a priority, please tell us what you would be willing to give up in order to get that. So that's the general message that has gone out.
Any last comments, questions? As always, if anything comes to you, just shoot Dr. Tracy an email. Okay, approval of minutes. That the Board of Education approve the September 13th, 2022 Board of Education regular meeting minutes. Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Ms. Guernsey. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Superintendent's report. Dr. Tracy.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to restrict my report to the math materials issue that garnered some conversation at the tail end of our meeting last time. And I've asked Dr. Zavajancic and Dr. Rasmussen to provide you with a brief report summarizing the history of the planning and funding for that item, having to do with the illustrative math program and the options that they see from this point forward to address the concerns that were raised. So let me turn it over to them. Thank you.
Good evening again. In a moment, Dr. Rasmussen will go through the timeline and decision-making process of the illustrative mathematics, specifically Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry resources moving forward. We'll highlight the spending on the other ones, but the discussion will mainly center around illustrative mathematics at this point. From the approval at the Board of Ed level last January to the funding sources for those varied resources throughout the spring, to the actual acquisition of the materials, and finally, our recommendation moving forward, knowing what we know now about this information.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here tonight to kind of talk about, start with really our timeline of where we started. One where we initially presented to the Board of Education our proposal for the curriculum and the resources, and actually that came in December of 21. And then transpired with the approval in early January of 2022. And that also then spiked off some budget discussions of where would the funding kind of where would it lie, where it ended up kind of being transferred over to the ARPESSER grants for that funding. And once upon approval, we actually we kind of jumped right into the professional development. In this professional development, we actually had numerous trainings actually starting mid-February, going on through March, going in through April, and even in through May, where we did look at what was the online platform and how to navigate it, to the instructional design a number of different ways. One, we had a professional development on problem-based teaching. We had a professional development on engaging students in the learning process, and we had a number of different PDs along the way. Also going on to, again, going on with our inquiry of learning about how to best implement this resource. We even did a visit to Norwalk High School, Brian McMahon High School, that has been implementing this for a couple years. Our Norwalk visit came from the discussion with the teachers, who were very adamant to kind of now thinking about kind of looking at these two physical resources and some maybe kind of identifying some of the issues that it may provide, especially one being two very kind of large resources and being able to house and going students back and forth and being able to write in these resources, which is, well, like, I'll be saying this stress this, that we still want students to be able to write and be able to show their work. That's one of our core beliefs, on top of also kind of support on online kind of math resources. So this really came out of discussion through the teachers, through the high school kind of math liaisons, that this was maybe kind of think about how can we rethink this resource and be able to provide supports within the classroom. There was a desire that we could do this in a different way. So then, through the discussions with the teachers on kind of how do we kind of maybe find a maybe different way, but kind of also not provide these too thick resources, is to also then go down where we actually looked at providing kind of more unit-based supports. And this ultimately kind of went out into our purchase of the illustrative math in the June 22 through a quote and purchase order. Looking at this, like you can see specific samples. This is actually directly from, if you actually, this is from actually our Algebra 1. This is actually was the first kind of a lesson and activity that was actually in this one. In terms of getting to know you, a warm-up, which was kind of one of the key aspects of some of the trainings that we did, was actually getting kids engaged in the work, talking and amongst themselves in the classroom, and then diving into the specific activity, specifically going relating to so warm up over here, specific kind of directions and specific kind of 1 through 5 in terms of the activities that the students would be going through. In terms of kind of putting together our own resources, that the teachers felt that that they can actually have a little more control over some of the spacing and other different things. Again, this is exactly the same question. Again, which one doesn't belong, A through D, and then kind of going over here, specific criteria, and then the students actually getting into the activities, again, with a little more spacing. Thus, we were able to control some of the resources that we were providing to students. Similarly, kind of this is actually what the online platform looked for the same activity. So again, questions, and then kind of statements, again, prompting the students to kind of get into the math, going through questions A through C, kind of again, going through those little debates. Also providing in the online tool some specific tools that you actually can get into, some drawing tools and some of the geometry. I was in a classroom here about a week ago, where they're in our Unit 1 for our geometry, they were using the online kind of applets that Desmos embedded into this tool that McGraw-Hill provided to us. Similar to here, kind of getting into these questions, again kind of text boxes for able students respond, that actually would send those to the teacher. So again, there's 3 specific kind of aspects where we had the books, and then the ones that we did kind of put into smaller amounts, but also the teachers having the digital kind of platform. Ultimately, kind of getting at is that what was presented to you on our December 21 presentation, and also for approval. We had 190 in terms of EdGems, 6-year license, 333 in terms of illustrative math for 6 years. We initially put up a Blitzer text for 6 years for our pre-calculus. I'll talk about the parallel one here in a second. Modern math, transition to college math, and advanced mathematical resource. In terms of the actual purchases, because of kind of now some increases in enrollment to allow some buffer for students to be that transfer in, so we did have an increase in terms of our 6-year license for our EdGems. Because we chose not to go with the physical resource, it actually went down to $280. Now, if you look at the overall expenditure that we actually did put in, this was right around about 308 and change. But that actually included about $30,000 that we paid in terms of professional development. So if we actually take off the professional development, it actually comes down to about $280. We pushed off the Blitzer text. So that was in terms of, because we said we would be putting that into our request this upcoming year. We had modern math in terms of we did have a lower enrollment. Again, similar to like a statement said during the science presentation. Again, a new course. Yeah, there wasn't we'll probably kind of build that up in terms of our enrollment in more sections. Our transition to college math, because we have, again, a little more lower enrollment, I was able to pay that out of last year's text materials, and we did not run the advanced mathematical decision making. Because of this, because of all these different kind of differences, just kind of illustrating some of the differences that we paid between the Ed Gems and some of the other licenses. In terms of, we did incur a cost increase in terms of the Ed Gems. We did have to come off in terms of about a $52,000 savings, but also taking off the $150 for the pre-calculus, modern math, transition to college math, and also advanced mathematical decision making. But ultimately, is now providing options if we want to go move forward, is kind of providing options of if we want to provide these workbooks back for the teachers and also for the students. Ultimately, guys, these are quotes in terms of what we received from the McGraw-Hill. Again, what we're working with them. If we want to go again back to a 6-year license, they gave us a quote of $120,000. 6 year, but again, if we want to do a 5-year plus a volume 2, because we'll be partway through the year by the time if we wanted to get these resources, it would be about $111,000. If we went a straight 1 year, 151, and then if I just did a 1 year in terms of a volume 2, approximately $23,000.
Just to be clear, those are 1 year fees, and 2,400 textbook workbooks will be sent every single year for the exact license. That's not a reoccurring cost. It's a 1 year cost.
So I mean, there's a lot of pros and cons for each one of these choices. So I mean, in terms of being the use, how will these resources, in terms of the use in the classroom, if we're transitioning over to more using on terms of the online platform. So there's a lot of different kind of things and options that we can provide to actually just support moving forward. So ultimately, in discussion with administration, we really kind of think that going to a 5.5-year license with the physical books would be our best option. And similar kind of ultimately is that we believe, based off of our correspondence with the McGraw-Hill rep, this could be something that could be turned around in a very short amount of time, kind of barring any back order kind of challenges. So I turn it over to Dr. Tracy or Dr. Zavajancic in terms of being able to answer any of your questions along the way.
And understanding that the board, or at least some board members, have their own questions and concerns about physical materials versus virtual materials. But I did want to ask, and in keeping with the comment that Mr. Smoller offered earlier tonight, understanding that the board gets the last word on this stuff, but I would be interested in your opinion as to, if it were up to you, what you think the best course forward is to give teachers and students what they need to be successful in this coursework. And then we'll, obviously, board members will weigh in and they get the last word.
So to reiterate what Dr. Rasmussen said at this point, our recommendation is to go with the half-year physical textbook for volume 2, which is the second half of the year, as the first volume wouldn't be used, and then continue to purchase the 2 volumes thereafter.
Mrs. Gerber,
Is it possible that you could circulate those books around while we're having this discussion? Thank you.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused here. It seems like the whole basis of this discussion came out of the fact that there were concerns that teachers or students, or both teachers and students, did not have access to or weren't able to use the textbooks that I thought we had approved. So I'm just trying to understand how where is that disconnect coming from? Are there not texts? I'm still not, I don't mean to be dense, and it's getting late, so maybe I'm just not thinking straight, but I'm trying to understand how this came about and exactly what the story is, because my understanding was that we approved textbooks, and it seems like that's not the case, or they're not being used in some instances. I just want to get some clarity on that.
So I'll let Dr. Rasmussen talk about the decision-making of moving to the digital version. The textbooks were approved, and the digital version of the textbooks were purchased. So all of the content the skills, the work in them was purchased through the digital version. That decision, after the approval of the textbooks, I'll have Dr. Rasmussen talk about with discussions with within his department.
You know, ultimately, the students have access to all the resources in terms of the online, in terms of, but also kind of the decision to go to more of a unit-based type of resource that we kind of provided to the students. So, like as I demonstrated in terms of what was in the workbook to what we kind of, because this was the request from the teachers, they want the students to have something to write on, which I think is appropriate, but they didn't want it in the very big, large format, the two very large volumes. So through the discussions with the teachers, we thought, okay, maybe we can go into that smaller format by unit, which then gives the teachers the flexibility, one, to kind of, if they wanted to kind of do some editing and do some increased spacing, but also kind of keep it in a smaller format. There were some things kind of talked about related to, okay, what the students losing those big, large workbooks. And so that the workaround was to kind of then develop those more unit-based type of kind of handouts that the students would get, was exactly what was in those two large volumes. So are we using the approved resources? Yes. Are we using them in a different form? Yes. So that's pertinently kind of, are they there? Yes, but if it is something that maybe looks a little different, but also kind of be thinking about being able to access and use those online resources more and more as we kind of continue to do our professional development around those.
Thank you. And I got to say, the first person who came to mind when I started hearing about teachers making copies was Mr. Peterson, because I know that's something he's very, very sensitive to in terms of the budget. So I guess that is a legitimate concern, though. I mean, how many copies are we talking about here, and what are the budget implications, if any, of that?
I mean, do all the teachers request the copies? No, some teachers have chosen to kind of take care of and use the online platform. So it's kind of a mix in terms of what teachers are choosing, what teachers are not. That's really one of the big questions that are coming out of here, because we could choose. I mean, one of the choice, like we've chosen you, is the teachers. We're going to the 5-year license with a 5.5-year license. But the teachers still have the ultimate control of what they hand out to the students and what gets used. So there's something. So there's a lot of kind of options in how we kind of think about this, and ultimately what the teachers use comes down to how do we make the best decision moving forward. So yeah, are we cognizant in terms of the amount of copying? Yes. I think we want to kind of also think about, similar to like they're taking the PSATs tomorrow. Well, guess what? Those are online now. So being able to use and kind of get accustomed to using those online platforms, I think, can be also beneficial. However, we still value the students actually showing their work, so then the teachers can actually see what the students are thinking and saying.
And I absolutely understand. I mean, I realize that a lot of things have gone online that used to be, hard copy, and in many ways. I think just my concern in all of this is just there seems to be a certain amount of confusion and somewhat of a disconnect in terms of, I think, at least what I thought I had approved and what was going to be happening in the classrooms. And it appears that apparently there's some teachers who also were. And I understand that there are a lot of teachers, and I'm sure a lot of them feel differently about different things, as they would with anything. But something like this that we had a fair amount of discussion about, it just seemed like what I thought was going to happen and what ended up happening weren't the same things. And it sounds like there were some of that happening in schools as well.
Yeah, like I said, ultimately, a lot of this came down to the discussion with teachers, what they wanted, and how they were going to use the resources. So we're very cognizant of that, and we want to make sure, kind of use what we're actually putting our money in terms of what we're investing in terms of some of these resources. The last thing we want to do is actually invest in something and they end up sitting in the back of the classroom.
We agree that we can better communicate between the approval process and the final decision making in terms of purchasing the textbook online versus the approval process, which essentially was the workbook that sits in front of you.
Right, and just to be clear, and I'm sorry, and I'll stop after this, but just, I'm sure throughout this whole process of these books and the curriculum and everything, that many teachers were really involved in that process. So it just seemed odd to me that after it was all done, after the budget had been approved, I would have thought that some teachers at least, and maybe some were, and the ones who have the issue now weren't consulted, but it just seemed, again, a disconnect and confusion about something that we discussed at length and that cost quite a bit of money.
Ms. Guernsey? You had your hand up? No? Okay. Dr. Tracy?
Just one lesson I think we learned from this is that we need to be more explicit in future conversations. When I say textbook, do I mean this, or do I mean an electronic textbook? When is a textbook a textbook? And it seemed, and not having been here for the original conversation, but reviewing it now, it seems like one lesson that we've learned is that we need to be clearer when we're talking about a physical product or a virtual product or copying or some combination thereof. And I think that seems to have led us to this point.
Ms. Kelly?
Hi. I have a few comments, but I also have a few questions. But to that point, and to piggyback off of the, Board of budget priorities kind of, I made the assumption that by the time it comes to the Board of Ed for approval, that it has been pretty well vetted. So it is a little disappointing to hear that after it was approved, then we started to get hearing, oh, the teachers don't want the textbooks, or they don't want the workbooks, or they want this. And I feel like, I just feel like, I pushed back hard on these books during the budget process, whether it was because we could pay for it out of the grants or whatnot. I just pushed back pretty hard. And, to hear about limited by, and I heard a lot about cliffs. Well, we don't want to create a cliff. The, math curriculum is up for review, and insert any subject at this point, if it's up for review. And the more I'm hearing, the more it sounds like to me, and I could be wrong, but it just sounds like there seems to be more of a, well, math curriculum is up for review. We've got to buy books. We have to change the curriculum. We have to do it, even though it sounds like, and it's only one person who came for public comment, but, and we can vet this out separately somewhere, it doesn't have to be right here, right now, but, it sounds like, 190 days versus 140 days. Like, on the surface, that's a pretty shocking number. And the fact that, again, I have to imagine that was something that was vetted before it got to us. Like, we didn't go into that much detail about, when it's presented, I assume we can get the curriculum done in the allotted time of the school year. I don't know how granular we need to get in that process. So that, the public comment today, plus some of the we've had a meeting on this prior, was a little upsetting to me. To me, the elephant in the room was also about the training. We're hearing there was training, and now we're hearing there maybe wasn't. Again, it can be vetted somewhere else, but that just doesn't sit well with me. And then for the proposed solution to be to buy the second volume of, if that's the recommendation, again, hearing from assumingly only one, but, on good authority, probably speaks for many, that they don't want them, then I don't want to buy them. If they don't want them, then I don't want to buy them. It's just that simple. And while in theory we did approve them, that's because we were going on the assumption that they wanted them, or maybe not wanted them, but like this was best practice and this is what we needed. But we are learning in the daylight that it's not what they want. And I don't want to spend money just because we approved it, which leads me to my last comment or question, which is, if I look at that one page, and I know you had a page of the differentials, but before you got there, I just kind of added up the approved versus whatever, and my back of the envelope numbers were, there was about $163,000 difference between what was approved and what we actually spent, give or take. That was just me kind of rounding there. I know we paid for some of these books. I'm sorry, for all of them, like on this page here.
Yeah, just keep in mind the one that we deferred, like that we approved money that we are still planning on spending, but just not this year. We deferred the pre-calculus, the Blitzer text.
the Blizzard
So it's money
test.
that's, money that hasn't been spent, but is still on the horizon, and now something has changed.
Okay. Do we have it, oh, so that's 115,000. So if you take that away from my 163, that gets us down to about 50, and we're saying it's gonna cost 111? So like, the numbers just don't work for me, they don't make sense to me. It just doesn't make sense to me. And so I guess the last question would be of the 163 or whatever that number is. I know we paid for some of these books through the grants, and some of it was in the operating budget. Where does the money go back into grants, or is it money we can move around in the operating budget? Like which line item is that coming from?
The money came from the grants and continues to remain in the grants at this point. If I could just make one comment on the perhaps not buying the workbook textbooks. The teachers many of them do still want and require the paper versions. And if we do not go with the administrative recommendation at this point, there still will be copying costs to copy the units for those workbook units that they will be using. So there will be a physical version of one sort or another on that.
But only for the teachers who will use them, we're not just making them for everyone, and they're not going to waste if they're not being used.
That is accurate, yes.
Anything else, Ms. Kelly, at this point? Okay, Ms. Mastacanelli.
I'm very uncomfortable with making my comments, and that's rooted in my incredible confusion in, I'm sorry, but what the hell is going on? This is normally a very straightforward process. We had our presentation in December of last year. We voted and approved it at January 11th. I looked back at our budget Q&A, and we had exactly one question regarding the curriculum materials for math, and that was from, I believe it was Mrs. Kelly, who asked, what do we do with recycling our old math materials? That's how non-controversial this was when we approved it. I'm looking at a digital workbook here, which I will admit I'm horrified by. This does not look easy to use. It does not look conducive to great learning to me at all. I did like the books. They looked very straightforward and very user-friendly, so I understand the approval of the books. I am horrified by this digital workbook. I am horrified by the fact that I am confused about what on earth is going on with the math at this point, so much so I'm not even sure what to ask as questions. I don't quite understand what I'm looking at here as options. You know, normally we buy a textbook, we have a textbook, we use a textbook. The textbook, exactly as Mrs. Kelly said, is well vetted, compared with others, standards aligned, we feel good and secure and happy, and our staff does as well, and they are vested in what we are using. And I'm not getting that sense at all, and that leaves me feeling extremely uncertain about the investment we've made. What are we doing to our staff to roll out this curriculum? What are we doing to support them? What the heck are our students getting? I actually can't answer those questions, and I'm finding that very disconcerting. There shouldn't be this level of confusion. We obviously heard from public comment regarding PD, and I'm looking at the documents we received as part of last December's presentation, and there was a great deal of money allocated to professional development, these implementation academies. I'm not quite sure what they are, but getting the sense that staff doesn't know how to use the resources that we thought they picked. I am just feeling I don't, and I'm looking at board as opposed to staff because I'm not sure if staff can answer this, but any line item in this upcoming budget that involves math, I'm going to have to be with Ms. Kelly. I need to feel really good about this because what we did last year was very straightforward. And again, so straightforward that we had no follow-up questions in the budget book. And I am finding it very disconcerting to hear what I'm hearing so far. And no, there was no question in that because I don't know where to ask the question. So maybe it starts with the screen up right now in terms of just what exactly are we choosing and how are we making darn sure that our staff is behind the choice that we select. I guess that's where I would start. But again, just feeling very unsettled right now because we have been through this with math before. I am having a major 2012 flashback, and that's not in a pleasant way because this is dealing with how our math is being delivered and our staff feeling prepared to deliver the math. And that's what I'm finding very unsettling about this.
I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that. I know there wasn't a question in that, but I will, and you don't have to, but
I mean, I can actually go into the PD. I mean, the PD we started, I mean, again, back in February. I can give you the list of a platform in terms of the PD that we went through. We went through multiple hour-and-a-half. We tried to start early, get the resources, to give the teacher kind of samples, actually the teacher editions into the teacher's hands. We got them out there early. We got, in terms of doing the PD, they were going through sample lessons. They were going through sample activities. Was it virtual? Yes, that's what they offered in terms of a lot of terms of these PDs offering now through virtual means. I mean, going through the instructional design. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I came here late. I came directly from Sacred Heart. I didn't hear what the public comment was, so I can't specifically talk to it. So, I mean, I can refer back to that later. But right now, to say that there was no PD, I mean, that's going to. That kind of, I'll be honest, that kind of disconcerting to me. We spent a lot of time on professional development. We spent a lot of time actually sitting in this room where we had probably about 15 teachers going through, and there was actually a unanimous decision that this is the resources they wanted. This was not something that we kind of lightly took. We even went out and trying to see it in action in different schools. We were actually, some of the trainers that we received, these are the national trainers for illustrative math, were actually complimenting us in terms of being able to start and be proactive in terms of the professional development that we provided at the very starting in February. Not because usually they do all these PD in 2 days right before the school starts, but also kind of seeing that the trouble that and also the teacher exhaustion that doing 2 days right before school starts. That's why we spread it out during the school year, that through the half year after we approved the resource. To say that we did not get professional development, to me, I cannot even say or support that. So that's what to me is like, we spent a lot of time actually getting to this resource. We spent a lot of time in professional development, and also then a lot of time in preparation and developing our implementation guides going to there. There were specific guides that actually say, how do you best implement this resource at a block schedule? So there's a number of resources that how to best support this. Now, we're learning along the way. This is a different instructional style that the teachers are working through, more of a student-centered approach. They're learning. So this is something that we're learning along, and we're supporting the teachers along the way. One of my things that I'm trying to provide the teachers as much as possible is they need time. It's a very dense resource to be able to deconstruct and be able to understand what the lessons are talking about. So it is not just here's a simple textbook, here you go, here's a set of problems. That gives you a lot, the teachers a lot of kind of cues and the types of things that the students will be thinking, the types of questions that will be thinking along the way. To say that we did not do a vetting process, I'm not comfortable kind of saying that.
Okay, and if I may follow up, because to be clear, I was paraphrasing a comment. So I'm not saying, and I don't believe the comment was that there was no PD, but whatever it was insufficient for staff to feel comfortable using the resource. I'm afraid you've also said something that has set the hair on the back of my neck up, which is the returning to this notion of the student-centered math instruction, which was a disaster the last time we tried it, because some staff in some schools were trained and in other schools were not trained. And we tried to do a train the trainer approach, and it did not work. And it was an instructional strategy that was insufficiently supported, and supported for staff to be able to do it, and then morale-wise, ability-wise, was not able to do it, such that staff in some school, and some met with me about it, were wildly enthusiastic, and others were not. And it was a huge controversy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're talking about changing an instructional methodology, that makes me extremely nervous that any staff is feeling like they are, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of it being time intensive, but I am very concerned about this because again, math is not my area of expertise. I'm not claiming it is. But the idea of math-centered learning with staff who are not comfortable with the method they are rolling out to me is highly problematic.
I just want to remind the board that while this discussion was about the format of the resource, that the resource that our teachers are using is the approved resource. Just putting it out there that this is it may not be in the book, but it's still the approved resource. And right now, we need to decide on, do we want this? Well, not right now, but this is what is before us right now. We approved, and I share, believe me, I share the frustration. I thought it was pretty straightforward. We had a curriculum presentation. The resources were very detailed in the curriculum document. How much it was going to cost, what the licenses were going to be. We had a discussion. We moved it forward. We moved it out of the budget. It was in the grant. We were postponing. Took it for granted that when boards of ed approve a textbook, that it was physical. To Dr. Tracy's point, that maybe there was a miscommunication there. As chair, frustrated that if there was a change in course of this is still the resource, but it's going to be a different format. All you had to do was just say, I need to come back before the board. So let that be a lesson in the future. I would ask just to bring it back, and we can have the discussion sooner rather than later. Because so, and I feel like we're a little bit of he said, and one of the he's did not hear the public comment. And the board is at somewhat of a disadvantage because we are getting somewhat mixed messages. We're hearing the teachers want the book from feedback that we've received. We're hearing that teachers don't want the book, the physical workbook. And that's where just to recap of where we are right now, and I agree, it's not an easy place to be. Dr. Tracy?
Yeah, in light of the significance of this discussion, the fact that I don't sense unanimity amongst even the board members on this topic, I'm going to suggest that we come back to you as soon as we can with a specific proposal and ask for a board vote to clarify the next steps. What you heard tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, is that of the options that were displayed on the board here, the second one, to get a 5-year license plus a 1-year volume 2, that would be the second semester, that is the option favored by Dr. Rasmussen and Dr. Zavajancic tonight. But what I'd like to suggest is they come back with a specific proposal on that, what exactly would be done, what would be obtained, what it would cost, where the money would come from, and frankly, put it to a vote so that they can then proceed with confidence rather than me or they trying to draw out of this conversation what we should do administratively, only to find out that that doesn't meet with your favor. So that would be my suggestion. I'm not looking to stall. I'm looking to come back quickly. If we can be ready in 2 weeks, then we'll bring it to you.
And Dr. Tracy, I would agree with that, especially now that there is a budget implication, that there's not, I think it would be a different discussion to get a sense of the body if there was funding still available based on the amount that we approve, but from what we have heard, the bulk of that money has already been spent on the resources that we chose. So if we choose to buy the textbook, it's going to come with an additional cost. Ms. Jacobson had her hand up.
That's what I wanted to clarify, is from these choices here, isn't this money already budgeted?
We spent this money. Correct me if I'm and
There is money still left in the grant that was not spent because we didn't purchase them. The number looks higher than what is left because the bundling that happens when you purchase at one time versus purchase after is within there. I'm meeting with the executive team of McGraw-Hill tomorrow to rebundle, but I don't have that quote for you at this moment. I didn't want to put a number up there that was not given to me at that time. So, for example, they'll say if you
So
buy...
by not ordering what we had approved we ordered, it's a little bit more now to do it after the fact again? Somewhat.
Yes, essentially they'll give you, when you say we'll order 240 or 2,400, they say, we'll give you, 10 teacher editions for free. So those pieces would come off when they rebundle it.
So I'm just still really confused why what we approved just didn't happen. So I'm not going to ditto that. I am also just, I appreciate that some teachers want to use the online thing and some want to use the hard workbook and some just want to print and whatever it may be, but this is not a new program, and this has been around for a really long time. There must be some published, reviewed mechanism to say, well, if you do A, B, or C, this has yielded the best for kids. So is there something that can tell? No, there's no difference whatsoever. Because I kind of don't believe that an online something is the same as a paper in their hand. Like, we know that that's not the case, right? So does that not exist, or is that factoring in here, or what kids would prefer? Because I've heard, well, some teachers want it, some teachers don't want it. Well, what do the students want?
I've not seen any studies on the difference in the program delivered digitally versus on paper. I would agree with you that they are very different ways, and there are preferences among students and teachers on this. We do want to make, that's why we are recommending the second one, we do want to make a consistent effort that no matter which teacher you have, you're going to have the resource that, whether that be the paper by copy, the digital if you wanted to use that, or the essentially paper copy. The digital version does have advantages that a paper copy just can't have in terms of the dynamic nature of the way it scores, gives feedback, and sends information to a teacher that many teachers do prefer because they're all linked together with that, but fully understand that many folks want to do it paper and pen.
Ms. Guernsey?
I keep getting distracted because this whole process has been so frustrating for me. I just, like Ms. Maxon-Cannelli said, I'm just, like, the more I hear, the more confused I am. And I guess I'm wondering, for when this comes back to us, if it could just be clarified, even if these instructional materials are granted to the teachers, the workbooks or whatever physical resource, if there's an expectation that teachers would be using them, because what we didn't hear in the math presentation is that any of the math courses would be taught exclusively using digital resources, and that's a big leap for me to take, and I just would like to understand that. And then secondly, if we go the photocopy route with or without the workbooks, what is the anticipated expense of those photocopies? Because, I mean, the workbooks are, like less than $10. So, I can't guess that, but I'd love an estimate on that. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
I guess the question that I have is that a decision was made to not get the workbooks. Fine. Not fine, but that's where we are. And had we not been asking questions about anecdotally hearing about people not having them, whatnot, I don't think we'd even be having this conversation now. But because we're having the conversation, now the recommendation is, well, we should buy the second volume of books. So is there what I'm missing is, what is the rationale that, we heard the rationale for not buying was the teachers didn't want them, they were bulky, they were XYZ, but now a month later, just because we're asking questions, let's get the books. Like that, I'm not connecting those two dots on, we either needed them or we didn't need them. And just because we're asking questions shouldn't change that answer, is what I'm getting at.
When we went through, it's a good question. When we went through the process of backtracking on what was purchased and what wasn't purchased, and seeing what was actually being implemented, although the majority of the teachers said we'd prefer the digital version, many were also requesting the paper copies of it in addition to the digital version, which is why we're making the recommendation of not copying and getting the five-year license for the paper copies, because they already have the digital version. So they currently already have a workbook, essentially, that's being copied, even though they have a digital version, although it wasn't purchased as a workbook. Both still exist in the Algebra 1 Algebra 2 and geometry classes, just not in the big tome that you have in front of you at this point, in separate packets.
Okay, that doesn't really answer my question, but it's late, and I don't want to belabor this. But thank you, thank you. I just don't understand why it was deemed unnecessary, and now it's necessary, where I feel like, again, we wouldn't be having this conversation if Ms. Guernsey hadn't started asking some questions, and now here we are, and I'm just a little confused about the flip-flopping there and the justification for it, but really it's late. We don't have to talk about it anymore.
I think that part of that, and just for the board, Ms. Kelly and Ms. Guernsey and I met with staff just to kind of get a little preliminary of what happened before we brought it to the full board. And as we've heard, some teachers want this, some don't. And my feedback was, if we're going to give to some, we really have to be consistent that everybody needs to have the same resource. Can't be 10 classes here. It's either all or nothing, in my opinion. I mean, I bring that to the board, but for all our discussions about consistency, I didn't think that the board would be okay with, well, those 3 classes at Ward get the book, and the other classes don't. So that's where we are right now, with why the recommendation is moving forward with all, as opposed to doing it piecemeal. Ms. Mazzacanelli.
And obviously, I would be interested in hearing from our math leadership and in the department, but I would take the exact opposite view, because I just think of our other disciplines that use their resources as suits them best, that they choose. I mean, ultimately, what I care about are the results. Did you learn the algebra? Did you learn the geometry? If I use a Warner's book to teach grammar and somebody else is using the online Grammar Bites website, at the end of the day, can my students write well? And so I hear what you're saying, because obviously there's the expectation then of the supportive PD, and so that can be a little bit dicier. But it is very clear that there needs to be a back to the drawing board discussion about this, because what I don't want to hear is that our students aren't achieving as well after we've just invested a tremendous amount of money in something that our staff is not comfortable using, that's student-centered, which is deviating from a method that has been working well. It's just that there's an awful lot to this that, most important, if our teachers aren't comfortable, it won't work, period. It doesn't matter how good it is. So something's been missing. But again, I would be open to possibly not having the same resource for all staff. So long as they can achieve the same results, that's what I'd be interested in.
Any other comments, questions? Okay.
We will come back to you with a specific proposal, taking into account what we've heard from the public as well as the board, and as soon as we're ready, it'll be back before you. And because of the mixed feelings and complexity, I think this is something that needs to be voted on, so that then we can proceed with confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to the board, I know that there was some confusion, but if any other questions about this issue come to you, please don't wait. The sooner that you can get them to staff, the better, in order to get this resolved. Thank you. Dr. Tracy, do you have anything else to report?
Not at this hour. I think I'll leave it as it is, and I'll be back with you in a couple of weeks for.
Have you done anything fun this week?
Oh my goodness, I did tell.
Anything fun school related in the Fairfield Public Schools?
Well, I haven't had a lot of fun this week.
Well,
We're
not
working
last
on all this
week,
stuff.
yeah.
But I will tell you that my grandson has finally shifted from asking me to read him bedtime stories to asking if he can read me something. I told this to my colleagues this morning. That was my good news for the day. So hopefully that's a trend that will continue.
All right. Well, that is some good news. Thank you for that report. All right, moving on. Committee liaison reports. Ms. Rotelli.
Our SEPTA update. There's a couple things I have to give out to the public. First, SEPTA is doing its annual Lyman Orchard fundraiser. It's pies, cookies, and gifts. It's open now. This is a wonderful fundraiser for SEPTA, but also benefits the community. You can order pies and treats. You can order gifts to be shipped, wherever you live. And you can also take the opportunity to donate a pie. And I believe at our last meeting, Christy Vitale reported that last year we donated 100 pies to Operation Hope. They were overjoyed. Pies come frozen. So please be on the lookout for the links that are floating around social media. If you need a pie for the holiday, you can get one. And if you'd just like to donate to Operation Hope, it's a win-win for everyone. SEPTA's annual trunk or treat is happening on October 23rd at North Stratfield from 3 to 5. It's a free activity for everyone. Touch a Truck will be there. It's lots of fun, so please come out and just join the fun with your family. And our October meeting will be on October 26th, 7:30 in the McKinley cafeteria with Melissa Bilcher, who is an ADHD and executive function parent coach, who will be giving a lecture. So I hope to see some of you there.
Thank you, Ms. Fratelli. Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, just briefly about Finance Committee. We did talk about some things we talked about tonight. Ms. Laborious also had some mock-ups for ways that she wants to present budget data going forward to us. One thing I did want to mention is I had it on our agenda, transportation update. I had put that on there because Board of Finance at the last quarterly meeting had asked a lot of questions about how the buses were running this year. We weren't able to do that because of some scheduling issues, so we'll do that next time around.
Anybody else? Mr. Issa.
So I gave an update from facilities last meeting, but we are meeting next week. So we are on track for a meeting, and one of the agenda items is going to be trying to come up with a draft for the full board of some proposed updates to the facilities guiding principles document. So we will be presenting that to the full board at hopefully a soon-to-be scheduled special meeting. And I just drew a blank. Go to somebody else, and then if I think of it, I'll come back. Sorry.
Mr. Issa, you attended the capital planning working group. Do you have anything to report from that?
Yes, so I did attend the last capital planning work group. The Board of Ed was not speaking to any of our work, but we do continue to go as a group to represent all the town bodies. So there was some discussion from DPW, Conservation, and Engineering on their proposals, and then we have another meeting tomorrow for other departments on the town side. But we will be talking about our capital spending that we have planned for the next 5 years at a future meeting.
That meeting for the Board of Ed, our proposed capital and non-recurring projects, I believe is
going to be changed. Sorry to cut you
again?
off. We are going to swap with Parks and Rec because of Board of Ed availability, namely myself.
I think that swap might have already been made. It's swapped again? The 16th? Okay, to be continued.
Yeah,
I believe it's posted. The agendas are posted now on the website. So
yes, and there was this last meeting was recorded, and FairTV was there.
All right, so for members of the public, check the town website, and the agendas will be posted. These are being held at Sullivan Town Hall. Mrs. Gerber.
PTA Council is meeting tomorrow night here, so I'll be back here again. And I believe that Mr. Testani is going to be coming to the meeting. I extended an invitation to him, and I believe he will be coming. And then with regards to Mill Hill, last week, Mr. Asa and Mrs. Vitale and myself met with the building committee chair, Jason Lee, did a tour of Mill Hill. The school really looks great. We're looking at some of the grounds and the landscaping. As I'd mentioned before, some concerns about things that have been planted during the drought conditions. So my understanding is now that Jason is going to be talking to Mr. Morabito, I believe, about there's some costs near the All Abilities playground. There's a kind of a turfish surface, which is really, really in terrible shape and muddy, and a couple of us almost wiped out walking out there. So just to see if some of the money in the building committee funds, because they still do have some money left, and they will be definitely returning some to the town, but perhaps holding a little bit back for landscaping, and perhaps to see what the costs are and how difficult it would be to get that turf area by the playground, because it really is not in great shape. So I'll keep everyone posted.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Asa.
I remembered. So Mr. Papa George isn't here tonight, and he's off, so I couldn't speak to him before the meeting tonight. But I had brought up the idea of the end of October starting to slow roll a GPS tracking app for the buses. I need to speak and meet with Mr. Papa George and Mr. Schneider in transportation to follow up on this. As has been reported already, with the driver shortage, our numbers of routes is greatly lower than what it normally would be. So routes are already longer because there aren't drivers. And now there are less drivers, from what I understand from Mr. Papa George the last time I spoke to him, than we started the year with. And there have been instances with drivers calling out and us not being able to run the full route package, so routes have been collapsed. When that happens, the app system will not properly work because it can't tell when you collapse a route that it is no longer that route. So my fear is that may lead to more confusion of parents. So again, I will bring another update to the board, but my goal is to meet with the two of those gentlemen and find out if we need to pause this a little bit longer.
And also, just for the public, I think when we last reported, we were supposed to go up and meet with the State Board of Education actually tomorrow, October 12th. That is no longer happening. So if anybody is listening and was planning on going to the State Board meeting tomorrow thinking that we were going to be presenting our amendment to the Racial Imbalance Plan, that meeting has been, at this point, postponed to November 2nd. That meeting is up in Hartford, 9:30, public comment. You need to register for in-person public comment. The agenda will be posted. You can also submit public comment electronically. And as we get more information about that meeting, we can report at our last meeting in October. Mrs. Maxon-Canelli.
Will that meeting be televised? Because I know that was something that was happening with the October meeting. They were clear that you had to be there in person because it wasn't going to be recorded, couldn't be viewed. Do we know if that will be different for the November meeting?
I will check with the folks at the State Department of Ed. They did say for tomorrow night, perhaps because they're not in Hartford, that they could not do the live streaming. November 2nd, we'll be back in Hartford, so I'll check to see if streaming will be available.
Their meetings, when they're in Hartford, usually are recorded. So hopefully it'll be good that it was moved that those that are staying in Fairfield will be able to view it. Any other committee reports? Okay. Moving on to open board comment. Any open board comment? Trying to think if I have anything to report to you. No. Moving on to public comment. Any members of the public? Invite you to come forward. Okay. Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Ms. Jacobson, can I have a second? Mr. Peterson, all in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.